Chapter 22:14. Gong Jie retorted coldly. So, your way of thanking me is to steal my first kiss? Tired face. Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at him in disbelief. Clearly, he was doubtful of his words. So, Yu suddenly inched closer to him and said teasingly, Uncle is still a pure and innocent little virgin? T. Gong Jie's face turned red. He was so embarrassed that he looked like he was about to bleed. He said in all seriousness, Uncle has been on the battlefield since he was young. I've been to many battles and have given pointers. T. Yu covered his mouth and snickered. Giving pointers? Giving pointers to you? Gong Jie was beyond embarrassed. He was in his 20s, yet he was being mocked by a 7-year-old boy. He couldn't take it lying down. Gong Jie glanced at Yu, who couldn't stop snickering, and said coldly, Humph, I'm not going to stoop to your level. Hee. Stubborn. Yu mocked him. Suddenly, he thought of something and shook his head. No wonder I sensed an ascetic aura from you the first time I saw you in person. Turns out that uncle is so pure. Come, do you want me to teach you how to kiss? Go away. Gong Jie pushed him away in disdain. However, Yu seemed determined to tease him. He wrapped his arms around his neck and pouted, wanting to kiss his thin lips. Little Jie, you're here. Yun Shirshir's voice suddenly rang out. Yu stopped in his tracks. Both he and Gong Jie looked back and saw Yun Shirshir standing at the kitchen door, smiling like a flower. You're just in time. Dinner is about to be served. With that, Yun Shirshir went back into the kitchen. Yu shot him a look. Why aren't you helping mommy? Gong Jie replied with a then stood up and went to the kitchen. In the kitchen, Yun Shirshir was seriously preparing the soup. She put in a spoonful of chicken essence and scooped up a mouthful of soup. She carefully blew on it and gently took a sip to taste it. Seeing this, Gong Jie's eyes could not help but curve into a gentle smile. Following that, he silently moved closer to her and suddenly reached out his hand to hug her waist from behind. He gently rested his chin on her shoulder. Yun Shirshir was startled. She turned around and saw that it was Gong Jie. She heaved a sigh of relief and said angrily, Xiao Jie, why didn't you make a sound when you walked in? You're like a cat. That's because big sister is too focused. Gong Jie glanced at her hand. Are you making soup? Yes. Do you want to try the pork rib soup? Gong Jie nodded, looking very expectant. Just as Yun Shirshir was about to start, Gong Jie suddenly reached out and held her hand. He took a small spoonful from the spoon in her hand and gently took a sip. Suddenly, his eyes lit up unexpectedly. Not bad. What do you mean not bad? Yun Shirshir protested. Hey, aren't you underestimating me? Is my cooking as bad as you think? I've never tried your cooking before. This is probably the first time, right? Yun Shirshir was the most annoyed. What do you mean by the first time? I used to cook noodles for you when we were young. Gong Jie broke out in a cold sweat and said coldly, Instant noodles count. Why doesn't instant noodles count? You don't even know how to cook instant noodles. Gong Jie was speechless. Please, that was because he was lazy. Gong Jie said again, Give me a piece of pork rib to try. Chapter 22:15. Yun Shirshir nodded and carefully picked up a piece of pork rib with her chopsticks. She carefully held it in her hands and blew on it gently, afraid that the pork rib would scald him. Be careful, it's hot. Gong Jie was envious and was about to take a bite out of it. Suddenly, a broad palm appeared out of nowhere and pushed him to the side. Before Yun Shirshir could react, she saw a tall figure slowly approaching from the corner of her eye. Wuxia had entered the kitchen and pushed Gong Jie aside. He calmly held Yun Shirshir's wrist and naturally put the pork rib into his mouth. Yun Shirshir's lips twitched. Gong Jie came back to his senses and looked up. He saw Wuxia holding Yun Shirshir's shoulders. His mouth was moving as he looked at him warily. When did he come in? Recalling the push just now, it must have been this fellow. Wuxia saw Gong Jie enter the kitchen and quickly followed him. When he reached the entrance of the kitchen, he saw a certain man openly holding his woman's waist and leaning his head on her shoulders. Although this man was his legitimate brother-in-law, he found this scene extremely annoying no matter how he looked at it. Hence, just when Yun Shirshir was about to feed him the pork rib, Muyaja walked over and pushed Gong Jie away. He leaned forward and pulled Yun Shirshir into his arms as if declaring his sovereignty. When Gong Jie saw this, he narrowed his eyes slightly and snorted coldly. "Brother-in-law, what are you doing?" Muyaja said righteously, "I'm here to help." Help? Who would believe that? He obviously didn't want to see him being too intimate with his sister. Gong Jie gritted his teeth. This was the reason why he didn't want his sister to get married. Out of nowhere, another man appeared in his sister's world and fought with him for his sister's love. More importantly, this fight was perfectly justified. He had no room to refute. Gong Jie felt particularly unbalanced. He glanced at Muyaja, only to see him sizing him up as if he was looking at an invader. The two men glared at each other like tigers eyeing their prey. In the air, electric currents couldn't help but collide. Like electric sparks, they faced off in an invisible confrontation. Yun Shirshir broke out in a cold sweat. She picked up 2 pieces of pork ribs with her chopsticks and stuffed them into each of their mouths. Then she pushed the 2 of them out. "Go back to your seats and sit down. Don't get in the way here. Madam? Sister." Bang! The kitchen door slammed shut. The 2 men were given the cold shoulder at the same time. They resentfully turned their faces and looked at each other in disgust. Yu and Xiao Yichen sat at the side, the corners of their lips twitching. Then, they looked at each other and gave each other a look. The 2 little fellows walked over and each of them hooked their arms around a man's arm. Xiao Yichen hooked her arm around Muyaja's arm and pushed him back to the table. She urged, "Daddy, stop messing around. You're going to be a burden if you go to the kitchen to help. Be good and sit down." Yu pulled Gong Jie to sit opposite Muyaja and reminded him, "Uncle, be good and sit down. Dinner will be served soon." With that, the 2 little fellows hooked their arms around each other's shoulders and went into the kitchen to help. Chapter 22:16. Yu and Xiao Yichen served a sumptuous spread of delicacies to the table. "Let's eat." The table was filled with laughter. Yun Shirshir poured wine for Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho. As for the mother-daughter pair, they behaved themselves and ate in silence. Yun Qinli was the tactful one. Occasionally, she would chime in with a few pleasing words and quickly immerse herself in the joyous atmosphere. Halfway through the drinking session, Gong Jie and Muyaja started a fight. The 2 men sat opposite each other and downed an entire bottle of white wine. Of course, Gong Jie was the first to start the fight. He first poured half a glass of white wine and raised a brow in Muyaja's direction. Then he raised his wrist and offered a toast. That look was undoubtedly a blatant provocation. There was no reason for Muyaja not to accept his brother's toast. After all, he was the older one. Besides, how could he have stage fright when his brother-in-law offered a toast? Thus, the 2 men drank 1 glass after another and downed more than 2 caddies of white wine. The rest of the group was stunned by the sight. What was even more shocking was that the 2 did not show any signs of drunkenness even after downing 2 liters of wine. If it were Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho, they would have long been so drunk that they would have collapsed on the table and lost consciousness by now. These 2 men, on the other hand, downed more than 2 caddies of white wine. 2 bottles of white wine were almost empty, and only then did Gong Jie and Muyaja seem to be in the mood to drink. What a joke. Gong Jie's alcohol tolerance over the years was not for nothing. He still remembered that time when he was trapped in a war zone with a group of mercenaries from Russia. Along the way, when he was tired or sleepy, he would drink some vodka to perk himself up. Those Russians were especially ruthless. Sometimes, when they ran out of vodka, they would go to the medical team to get some medical alcohol, mix it with water and gulp it down. After many years of training, his alcohol tolerance was quite impressive. What about Muyaja? Naturally, he would not admit defeat. He had experienced many such situations since he was young, whether it was a dinner party or a drinking party. When he was very young, he started drinking alcohol. His alcohol tolerance was trained since he was young. First, he drank red wine. Slowly, he moved on to white wine, vodka, and many other strong liquors. Therefore, when he and Gong Jie were placed together, their alcohol tolerance was about the same. Neither of them was giving way to the other. Yu Yu watched from the side with a guilty conscience. These two guys didn't drink in small sips. They either didn't drink or drank it all in one go. Wasn't this combat power too terrifying? Could it be that this white wine was mixed with water? With this question in mind, Yu Yu curiously picked up the wineglass when Wuxia wasn't paying attention. She licked the white wine with her little tongue. She had only touched a drop when she suddenly choked on it. It was so spicy that she rolled her eyes and clicked her tongue for a long time. Her face instantly turned red from the spiciness. Ha ha ha! Yun Yeching was amused and deliberately teased her. Yu Yu, does the wine taste good? Yun Yeho could not help but laugh. You're so young, yet you want to learn how to drink like an adult. You're really promising. It suddenly started snowing outside the window. The snowfall was a little sudden and rushed. In just a short while, a thin layer of snow had accumulated on the ground, trees, and roof. In just a short while, the snow had become much thicker. Chapter 22:17. As they walked past, they left a trail of footprints of varying depths. Xiangti Walk was a retro castle-designed villa and bungalow. After the snow fell, it felt like a fairy tale world. Xiao Yichen pointed out the window excitedly and exclaimed, "Wow! It's snowing! It's snowing! We can have a snowball fight later." Yu Yu pretended to be reserved and ate quietly. Xiao Yichen suddenly tugged at his sleeve and encouraged him. "Yu Yu, let's play in the snow." "Humph! I don't want to play such a childish game with you," Yu Yu said proudly. However, even though he said that, he ate faster. Only God knew how much he looked forward to having a snowball fight. In the past, when it snowed in winter, Yun Shishir would not allow him to go out and play in the snow. After all, his body was weak. If he went out to play in the snow, he would catch a cold and catch a cold. With little Munchkin's physique, it would take at least half a month for him to recover. Moreover, it was boring to play in the snow alone. Even so, when it snowed, the little guy was still very excited. Hence, Yu Yu would sneak out behind Yun Shishir's back. Even if he hid in a corner and built a small snowman, he would still be satisfied. After the reunion dinner, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen pestered Gong Jie to build a snowman outside the house. Dragging Gong Jie along was not enough. Yu Yu insisted on bringing Wuxia along to have a snowball fight. Wuxia was silent. He sized up the two little guys who were eyeing him covetously. Who was the one who said not to play such a childish game like a snowball fight? Sensing Wuxia's teasing and playful gaze, Yu Yu, who had just put on his gloves and hat, glanced at him. Then he blushed and cleared his throat. In a serious tone, he said, "Xiao Yichen wants to play. I'm just accompanying him." This seemingly perfect excuse was met with disdain from Gong Jie and Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen said in disdain, "Yu Yu, I think you want to have a snowball fight too. If you want to play, just say it. What do you mean by playing with me?" Yu Yu's face turned even redder. "Shut up. Who said I wanted to play? Weren't you the one who kept encouraging me to have a snowball fight? Didn't I do it to accompany you?" What a pretentious excuse. Xiao Yichen blurted out an idiom. "You obviously want to play. Who said so? I'm just playing with you." "It's you who wants to play." Just like that, the two little guys bickered and led Gong Jie and Wuxia out to play in the snow. Yun Shishir couldn't help but worry. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen knew their limits. Wuxia and Gong Jie wouldn't turn a simple snowball fight into a bloody war. Would they? She couldn't help but shudder. Yun Yeching and Yun Yeho were already half drunk. Yun Shishir helped them up to the guest room on the second floor to rest. When she went downstairs, she saw Xiang Yu standing at the staircase, looking at her uneasily as if she had something to say to her. "Auntie, is something the matter?" "Sure. It's like this." Chapter 22:18. I don't have enough red packets for the children this year, but I'll definitely make up for it next year. Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment before her lips curled up. Red packets are just a way to express our sincerity and happiness. Don't take it to heart. I, I'm already very touched that you're so understanding. As she spoke, she suddenly sized her up cautiously and asked in a roundabout manner, Sure, did your father buy this villa? HM? Yoon Sure shook her head and smiled. My husband bought this villa. He originally planned to use it as our wedding home, but he said that it's too stingy to use it as a wedding home. Her nonchalant words set off waves of shock in Xiang Yu's heart. Yoon Qinli and Yoon Qingmiao, who were sitting at the side, also pricked up their ears to eavesdrop on the couple's conversation. When they heard Yoon Sure casually say that this villa was too stingy to use as a wedding home, they could not help but feel envious. This villa was small. It was more than 300 square meters in size, not including the 2 basement floors. With 4 floors and a small attic, there were a total of 8 rooms. It would not be a problem for 4 generations to live under the same roof. How could a newlywed's wedding home be called small? Wasn't her tone a little too arrogant? Yoon Qingmiao could not help muttering secretly, What does this brother-in-law do for a living? Why is he so rich? To be able to hold such a grand wedding on a private island, brother-in-law must have a powerful background. Is there a need to ask? With so much money, this villa is nothing to him. Things that are valuable to us are as light as a feather in his eyes, said Yoon Qinli. Yoon Qingmiao's eyes turned redder as she bit her lower lip hard. Sometimes some things were really unfair. It was really unfair. How much did Yoon Qingmiao yearn for such a villa? It had 4 floors above ground and 2 basement floors, including the attic. It was a spacious villa with a garden, and the luxurious decor was unbelievably beautiful. Such a villa was located on a piece of land where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. If she wanted to own it, she would not be able to touch it even if she spent her entire life. Yoon Sure, on the other hand, had easily obtained all of this. Why? Wasn't it because she had married a rich husband? If brother-in-law wasn't so rich with Yoon Sure's standard, how could she afford to live in such a high-end villa area? Yoon Qinli was also very jealous. If she could stay in such a villa for a night, she would be very happy. She felt that the girl who lived in such a villa was like a high and mighty princess, elegant and arrogant. However, she could only imagine all of this. You think this villa is too small? Xiang Yu said enviously. This villa is already very big. You two are newlyweds, and it's already very spacious for you two to live together with your 2 children. There's no need to buy more, right? The new house has already been decided. Muyaja has already made arrangements. Before the wedding, they will probably move to the new house. New home? When Xiang Yu heard this, her eyes widened slightly. She asked curiously, Has your new home been decided? Yes. Where? Cloudy Mountain Shuri. Cloudy Mountain Shuri. Yoon Qingmiao suddenly stood up in agitation. Yoon Qinli glanced at her and found her agitation abnormal. What's wrong? Chapter 22:19. Surprised, Xiang Yu asked, How did you know? Yoon Qingmiao replied, Because I know a celebrity who's staying there. I heard that she spent hundreds of millions to buy a mansion in Yunshan Shuri. Some reporters snuck into the villa and took a few shots. It's really beautiful. Hearing this, Xiang Yu was speechless. Yoon Sure curled her lips expressionlessly and said, Yunshan Shuri is a property that Yaja personally developed. Since this villa has a special meaning to him, we probably won't be moving after we move in. Yunshan Shuri was located on a mountain with excellent feng shui. The environment was elegant and charming, and the scenery was picturesque. Previously, the Mu Group had spent a huge sum of money to pave a mountain road for ease of transportation. Now that the underground tunnel was about to be completed, it should be much more convenient to travel from the city. Xiang Yu pressed, What about the villa here? It's probably vacant for the time being. Vacant? Xiang Yu bit her lip regretfully and sighed. It's such a pity for such a beautiful villa. Actually, there was a hidden meaning in her words. She was hinting to Yoon Sure that it would be a pity for such a beautiful villa to be vacant and unoccupied. It was not for sale or rent. Since it was vacant, it was better for them to live in it. This way, they could save a sum of money on rent, right? However, Xiang Yu was tactful and could not say this out loud, lest she appear too thick-skinned. Hence, she could only beat around the bush and remind Yun Shirshir to take the initiative to invite them to move into the villa. Yun Shirshir was smart enough to understand what Xiang Yu meant, but she pretended not to understand and smiled. He has many properties under his name, and most of them are vacant. He might auction off a few of them in the future. Yun Qinli suddenly asked curiously, Sis Shirshir, what does brother-in-law do for a living? He's also rich. With so many properties under his name and such a huge villa, his net worth should be hundreds of millions, right? Yun Shirshir only smiled and turned around to clear the table. Xiang Yu glared at them. In front of Yun Shirshir, she pretended to be exasperated and said, Qing Miao, Qinli, learn more. Don't just be envious of how happy Shirshir is now. She also suffered a lot back then. Now that her life is better, it's all because she has a good eye for people and married such an outstanding person like your brother-in-law. So, when you guys are dating, keep your eyes open and find a good match. In the future, you can live a good life like Shirshir. Yun Shirshir's movements suddenly stiffened. On the surface, Xiang Yu's flattering words fell into her ears, but they were especially unpleasant. What she was implying was that the reason she could live such a good life was all because of men. But what made her uncomfortable was that she made it sound as if she had chosen to marry Wuxia because of his wealth. But in reality, no matter if it was poor, rich or poor, even if it was just a small house, she would be satisfied. The definition of home was not how big it was. Instead, it was home where she could see the person she loved and live in harmony and warmth. That was her ideal home. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli were still saying enviously, Sis Shirshir is so lucky to be able to meet such a perfect man like brother-in-law. Chapter 22:20. Yun Shirshir turned around and smiled sweetly all of a sudden. I'm indeed very lucky. The man I love loves me back. This is a blessing that many people can only wish for. How can love alone be enough? Love is important, but material things are also indispensable. Yun Qingmiao said matter-of-factly. As the saying goes, all things are sad for a poor couple. When looking for a man, it's better to pick one with good qualities. Her mother chimed in. Shirshir, look. Qingmiao isn't young anymore. She's older than you. Your child is already 7 years old. But she's still single. Why don't you take a look and introduce a good man to us? Yun Qingmiao stomped her feet in embarrassment. Mom, what are you talking about? Despite her coquettish expression, she was actually looking forward to it, putting everything else aside. Just any one of Mu Yaja's circle of friends was a suitable candidate. If she could hook up with a man of noble status like Mu Yaja, she would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of her life. She would be able to live a life of luxury just like Yun Shirshir. Yun Qingmiao's plan was shrewd and ruthless. Yun Shirshir, however, merely smiled and said, It's not difficult to find a man with good qualities. Yaja's friends are all very outstanding. That's pretty good. Her mother said excitedly. Shirshir, you have to help us. It'll be even better if you can matchmake him and introduce him. The point is. Yun Shirshir suddenly hesitated. The point is? Yun Qingmiao and Xiang Yu stared at her nervously. Yun Shirshir said venomously, The point is that even if you like him, he might not like you. Yun Qingmiao was dealt a heavy blow. Her face turned ashen as she clenched her fists tightly and bit her lip indignantly. Xiang Yu asked awkwardly, Shirshir, how can you say that? Yun Shirshir raised her eyebrows but did not think much of it. She said, He doesn't like just any woman. First of all, she has to be good-looking, have big breasts, and have a perky butt. Second of all, she has to be cultured, have a high education, have a good family background, and have a good upbringing. Third of all, she has to be able to throw herself at him. Otherwise, why would someone as outstanding as him take a fancy to you? Xiang Yu was speechless for a while. Her face turned red because of Yun Shirshir's words. She wanted to refute, but Yun Shirshir continued, It's not wishful thinking to have an excellent partner. However, if he wasn't outstanding enough and had such high standards, he had to be handsome, come from a good family, and be rich and powerful. Would such an outstanding man lack fans by his side? Could it be that he couldn't do it? This was not a fairy tale. Even if Cinderella married the prince in the end, it was because she was beautiful enough, gentle and kind enough. Instead of racking her brains to climb up the social ladder, it's better to think about how to become an outstanding lady. With that, she smiled elegantly and enunciated each word clearly. Qing Miao, don't be envious of anyone. Happiness doesn't come from nowhere. You have to fight for it yourself. With that, Yun Shishir slowly brought the bowls and chopsticks into the kitchen. Yun Qingmiao tried her best to maintain her composure, but her anger could not be quelled. Her chest heaved up and down. After a moment of silence, she lowered her voice and said, "Ridiculous! You married a rich man, yet you don't allow others to have such thoughts." Chapter 22-21. Yun Qingmiao, who was already upset, was instigated by Yun Qinli's words. With nowhere to vent her anger, she could not help raising her voice. "Humph! Didn't she say that women should be independent? What about me, though? Didn't I rely on my brother-in-law to live such a good life? Would she be able to live in such a beautiful villa on her own? Can I have so many beautiful clothes to wear? Don't you rely on your man? Why are you indirectly mocking me for wanting to marry into a good family? Am I not worthy of marrying into a rich family?" In the kitchen, Yun Shishir frowned when she vaguely heard Yun Qingmiao's disgruntled mutterings. The biggest conflict between women was jealousy. She was not angry at all, though. The only reason others were jealous of her was that she was outstanding and lucky enough. Moreover, Yun Qingmiao was right. Mu Yaja had indeed sacrificed a lot for her. Everything she had, including Yu, was a blessing bestowed upon her by this man. She was grateful and cherished it from the bottom of her heart. Perhaps, in the past, she felt a little ashamed of her inferiority when she stood in front of him. She worked hard to become more outstanding so that she could be worthy of him. However, that was only because of her pride. Now, she did not think so much. She believed that women should be independent, but that was before Mu Yaja existed. God created men and women, and there was no such thing as equality between men and women. Men had more innate advantages over women, be it in strength, ability, or responsibility. Women, on the other hand, were gentler and more delicate than men. The two were interdependent in the first place. Women should be independent, but if a man was outstanding and responsible enough, it was better for them to rely on and trust him with peace of mind. Women yearned for such reliance. Men, on the other hand, relied on such reliance. She smiled nonchalantly and turned on the tap to wash the dishes. Yun Qingmiao heard the sound of running water coming from the kitchen, and her emotions became more complicated. She clenched her fists tightly and pursed her lips in grievance. Her mother said, "What do you know? This is called a sense of superiority. Shishir's life is better now. She married a good husband, entered a rich family, and has a pair of adorable xiao bao. This is a classic example of a mother relying on her children to rise in status, but I think she won't be able to enjoy such blessings for long. She's no different from those nouveau riches when she's so arrogant. Isn't she just a little lucky?" Yun Qinli added, "Poor us, we can only be envious. Mom, look, we're here to be bullied. She may seem low-key on the surface, but isn't she just flaunt in disguise? She's just saying that to show us how outstanding she is." Her mother, Qinli. "Okay, don't let her hear you." Yun Qingmiao grumbled unhappily. "That's how it is." Qinli didn't say anything wrong. She even said something like, "Why would someone so outstanding like you? Why don't you take a look at yourself? Brother-in-law is so outstanding. Why would he like her? Because she's Yun Shishir." Mu Yaja's cold voice was suddenly heard from the door. The mother-daughter trio jerked their heads up in shock, only to see Mu Yaja at the door. Chapter 22-22. Originally, the door was left ajar and was not closed at all. The two lads were having fun playing in the snow outside. Now that the snow was getting heavier, Gong Jie teamed up with the two lads to have a snowball fight. In the end, they were beaten by Xiao Chen, whose fighting prowess was off the charts. Mu Yaja originally did not want to participate, but Yu coquettishly asked him to join in the fun. He and Mu Yaja would be on the same team, while Xiao Chen and Gong Jie would be on the same team. Gong Jie was satisfied with that and encouraged him to join in as well. Mu Yaja simply decided to come back to get a pair of gloves and join the battlefield. However, just as he reached the door, he heard the trio's discussion. His hearing was very sharp, so he immediately heard Yun Qingmiao's jealous mutterings. Thus, he stood at the door and coldly sized them up. He did not hide his disgust at all. The trio saw him standing at the door as if he had heard all their complaints about Yun Shishir. For a moment, they felt extremely embarrassed. Yun Qingmiao, in particular, stood up nervously and looked at him in trepidation. She shrunk her shoulders and blushed. "Brother-in-law? When did you come in?" She shrunk behind Xiang Yu's back, obviously feeling very guilty. She did not know how much of her words had been heard by this man, so she felt guilty. Mu Yaja coldly pursed his thin lips and then slowly took a few steps toward them. When he was about 3 to 4 meters away from them, he stopped and slowly walked out. "I don't like anyone talking about my wife behind her back, even if it's someone close to her. Gossiping like this is very annoying." These were not particularly harsh words, but coming from Mu Yaja's mouth, they were full of mockery and disgust. There was a faint murderous aura and an overbearing aura. Yun Qingmiao's body swayed a little, and she almost lost her balance. "You dote on my sister so much. Don't spoil her. We shouldn't talk about her, but she was the one who... Whether I dote on her or not, it's not up to you to stand here and criticize, right?" Mu Yaja curled his lips coldly and said in disgust, "You're not welcome here, Scram. Brother-in-law." "Shut up." Mu Yaja's cold and indifferent eyes fell on them, his tone not allowing them to object. Feeling guilty, Yun Qingmiao swallowed the words that were about to rush out of her mouth. She took a deep breath and looked at the tightly shut kitchen door. She did not know where the courage came from, but it could be due to extreme jealousy or displeasure in some aspect. But she snapped, "Why should I? Wasn't this too unfair? What right did she have to put on such a high and mighty attitude? Like a spoiled princess who was pampered in the palm of someone's hand. And we're just complaining. Is there no room for negotiation? Moreover, what did I say wrong? How was she outstanding? She gave birth to a child at the age of 18 and got pregnant before marriage. She's such a pair of broken shoes and doesn't know how to behave. What's there to be proud of?" Smack! Mu Yaja's face was horrified as he raised his hand to slap her. He had never hit a woman before. In his opinion, men who hit women were scum. However, when Yun Qingmiao vented her anger by saying those words, he almost could not control himself and subconsciously slapped her. Chapter 22-23. Mu Yaja abruptly took a step forward and grabbed her by the throat. His palm was so wide and big that it was almost perfect for him to choke her. Just a slight squeeze, and her face changed. Her face flushed red, and the veins on her forehead were faintly bulging. Let go." The man's strength was truly terrifying. It was as if he could break her throat in the next second if he exerted a little more force. Under his grip, a suffocating feeling that could destroy heaven and earth assaulted her. She felt as if she was a tiny ant, and no matter how hard she struggled, she could not break free from his grip. Help. She could feel that the man was exerting a lot of force, as if he wanted to strangle her to death. Xiang Yu was taken aback by this sudden turn of events. She was stunned for a few seconds before she came back to her senses. She hurriedly went up to Yun Qingmiao, trying to free her from the man's grasp. However, she seemed to have underestimated the strength of Mu Yaja's grip. She begged for mercy while trying to pry off his hand with her fingers, but the man's fingers were like steel nails that were tightly wrapped around her neck. No matter how hard she tried, they would not budge. Yun Qinli too panicked. She stood aside in shock, her face ashen like a wax statue. "Let go. I beg you. You'll kill me." The kitchen door suddenly opened. Yun Shishir walked out. She was not surprised to see this scene. In fact, she was unusually calm. She watched in silence for a long time until Yun Qingmiao looked like she was about to faint. She then walked forward and held Mu Yaja's wrist, saying gently, "Don't be angry. Let go." Wuxia still refused to let go. "Be good." Yun Shishir tiptoed and gently pecked him on the cheek. Wuxia let go of his hand abruptly. Yun Qingmiao's body broke free from the restraint at once, and due to the inertia of gravity, she fell limply to the ground. She had just fallen to the ground, clutching her neck and coughing crazily. Her entire face was red all the way to her neck, and her eyes felt like they were about to pop out. Just as she was coughing non-stop, someone suddenly grabbed her neck again. She raised her head in a panic, only to meet Yun Shishir's cold eyes. Yun Shishir grabbed the woman's collar with one hand and lifted her up from the ground. She did not know where she got her strength from, but with one hand holding the woman, she used the other to give her a tight slap. Bang! A thunderous sound was heard. Yun Qingmiao was completely dumbfounded by the slap. Her eyes turned red and her lips trembled as she felt wronged. "I've always been very courteous to you. Because you're half my family, I've taken good care of you. But I seem to have overestimated myself. If you treat a dog well, the dog will wag its tail and beg for mercy. But what about you? You're worse than a dog." Xiang Yu felt humiliated and called out in disappointment, Sure, how can you say that? What do you mean you're worse than a dog? Isn't that so?" Chapter 22-24. With that, Yun Shishir flung Yun Qingmiao away. Yun Qingmiao stumbled a few steps backward and bumped into Yun Qinli. Tears rolled down her cheeks. They thought that Yun Shishir was made of water and could be molded into any shape they wanted. But this was the first time they saw her angry. It was so scary. "Why aren't you getting lost?" Yun Shishir reminded her coldly. Yun Qingmiao's shoulders heaved a few times. In a fit of anger, she picked up her bag and ran out of the door. "Qingmiao!" Xiang Yu chased after her and shouted. She exchanged glances with Yun Qinli before carefully sizing up Wuxia. Feeling awkward, she could not care less and chased after her with Yun Qinli. "Stop right there." Xiang Yu stopped abruptly and turned around. Yun Shishir said expressionlessly, "I'm warning you. Don't harass my family in the future, including Uncle Yeho. Also, keep your mouth shut when it comes to my matters. Otherwise, I won't be so nice." The house quieted down at once. Just as Yun Shishir turned around, the man grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace. "Little thing, why are you so fierce all of a sudden?" Wuxia was in a good mood as he ravaged her little face lovingly. When she flared up earlier, he unexpectedly found her adorable. It was rare to see her lose control like this. She was probably angry. Yun Shishir. As if coaxing a child, Wuxia gently stroked her hair and coaxed her. "Don't be angry anymore. Be good." Yun Shishir broke out in a cold sweat and pushed him away abruptly. "Hey! Are you coaxing me like I'm a puppy?" Yu suddenly ran into the house and stood at the door. She asked suspiciously, "Mommy, what happened just now?" "I saw the old witch and two little witches leave in a huff." Suddenly thinking of something, Yu's face darkened. She asked suspiciously, "Did those three bad people bully Mommy?" Yun Shishir's lips twitched. Feeling that the father and son were spoiling her like a child, she pushed Wuxia toward the door. All right. The bad people have been chased away by Mommy. Be good and go have a snowball fight." "Mommy?" Yu suddenly looked at her father sympathetically and said kindly, "If you want to have a snowball fight, at least give Daddy a pair of gloves, right?" Yun Shishir's faces she stuck out her tongue. Mommy's right hand. She ran to the cloakroom and took out a pair of gloves. She walked out and put them on for him as she urged, "All right, go now. Mommy's afraid of the cold, so I won't play with you. Daddy will play with you." With that, Yun Shishir added, "We'll come back to make dumplings together later." Yu glanced at Yun Shishir's nonchalant expression and felt reassured. She stuck her tongue out and said, "All right, Mommy will prepare the filling for the dumplings first. We'll make dumplings together later." With that, he held Wuxia's hand impatiently and ran out of the house. Yun Shishir returned to the kitchen and put the clean dishes into the dishwasher. She took off her apron and walked to the balcony. Leaning against the window, She silently looked out at the courtyard. From her angle, she could observe the battle. Chapter 22-25. In the courtyard, the four of them were divided into two teams. Yu Yu and Mu Yaja were in one team, while Gong Jie and Xiao Yichen were in the other team. However, no matter how one looked at it, Xiao Yichen's team was more powerful. Gong Jie smiled sinisterly and shook Xiao Yichen's hand. Then, the uncle and nephew looked at the other team and said ruthlessly, "You're finished. Be careful not to get destroyed by us." However, Yu Yu refused to admit defeat and said, "Uncle, don't underestimate my and Daddy's fighting skills. Don't say ruthless words first. In the end, you'll be defeated by Daddy and me." Yun Shirshir burst out laughing when she heard this. In a short while, Yu Yu and Mu Yaja worked together to build a trench and build a sturdy fortress with snow. It was undeniable that Yu Yu had a talent for snowball fights. When he was building the fortress, he even knew that snow alone was not sturdy enough. Hence, he found some discarded bricks from somewhere and built a small fortress. Then, he covered it with snow. Mu Yaja's eyes were wide open as he watched from the side. Yu Yu said disdainfully, "Daddy, why are you standing there like a fool? Prepare the ammunition." Mu Yaja scoffed at his father's disdain. Then, he squatted at the side and quietly prepared the ammunition. "Make the snowball bigger. Use your hands to squeeze it or it will fall apart." After Yu Yu finished building the fortress, he squatted on the ground and started to make the snowball. Then, he started to talk about the battle strategy. "Later on, I'll be in charge of defense and producing the ammunition. You'll be in charge of the attack." Mu Yaja nodded obediently like an obedient soldier. As for Yu Yu, he had the aura of a commander who was in charge of a battle. Soon, the snowballs were ready. Yu Yu continued, "Don't be reserved when you have a snowball fight. Don't have the burden of being an idol. Attack them crazily until they kneel and beg for mercy." Mu Yaja imagined Gong Jie kneeling in front of him and begging for mercy. Suddenly, a strange smile appeared on his face. "Okay, let's fight." Gong Jie hadn't finished building his fortress yet. Although Xiao Yichen was a fierce fighter, he was clumsy when it came to work behind the scenes. Compared to Yu Yu, who was the king of craftsmanship, what about Gong Jie? It wasn't any better. Yu Yu had already made the snowballs, but they had only built half of the fortress. While the uncle and nephew were still figuring out how to build the fortress to be strong enough, Mu Yaja and Yu Yu's first wave of attacks had already arrived. A solid snowball smashed into Gong Jie's head with a dong sound. "Ouch!" Gong Jie screamed and fell to the ground. Little Yichen was flabbergasted. Usually, when a snowball smashed into a person's body, it would scatter and turn into broken snow. However, Yu Yu and Mu Yaja had figured out that during a snowball fight, the snowball had to be squeezed tightly to remove the moisture from the snow. Mu Yaja had a lot of strength in his hands. A snowball was squeezed into an ice ball and smashed onto Gong Jie's head. But it didn't shatter. It was obvious how strong it was. Such a snowball would hurt the most when it hit a person's body. It was like a hard rock. Gong Jie held his head and got up from the ground. Mu Yaja threw 2 more snowballs at him. He seemed to be aiming accurately. All 3 snowballs hit Gong Jie's head without missing a target. Chapter 22-26. Gong Jie howled again as he suffered 3 consecutive critical hits and fell to the ground. Yu Yu laughed maniacally and said humiliatingly, "Uncle, you're a weakling." Yun Shirshir couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed as well. "Weakling." Gong Jie got up from the ground angrily. Perhaps he was too agitated. So he grabbed a ball of snow from Mu Yichen's unfinished fortress. He squeezed it slightly and threw it at Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja moved elegantly and dodged it nimbly. The snowball smashed onto Yu Yu's body and shattered immediately. It didn't hurt at all. Mu Yichen said pitifully, "Uncle, don't touch my fortress." Smack. Gong Jie hit his head in disappointment and said gloomily, "They're already at our door. Why are you still building a fortress? Let's start fighting." Xiao Yichen gave up on the fortress and stopped defending. He grabbed a snowball from the ground and threw it at Mu Yaja. The uncle and nephew sent snowballs flying at Mu Yaja one after another. The flames of war spread. Yu went back to the fortress and started to make snowballs continuously. Then, he sent them to the battlefield continuously. He cheered for Wuxia loudly, "Daddy, go! Kill them!" Wuxia went all out as he attacked the pair of uncle and nephew. Yu's snowballs were of excellent quality. They had strong attack power and increased the critical hit attribute. Seeing this, Yun Shirshir laughed so hard that her stomach hurt. How were those snowballs? They could be considered ice balls, right? Xiao Chen and Gong Jie's fighting skills were top-notch, especially Gong Jie. After all, he was an adult and his skills were on par with Wuxia's. With Xiao Chen's help, they were equivalent to half of Wuxia's fighting skills. The two of them cooperated well and attacked together. However, both of them were on the front line and lacked ammunition. The two of them were evenly matched. Yu watched the battle and made snowballs at the same time. He was overjoyed. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but feel sorry for Yu. Then, she smiled in relief. Putting aside those annoying matters from just now that he had calmed down and watched the family of four make a mess in the courtyard, a kind of peaceful happiness arose spontaneously. Yu hadn't played so happily in a long time, right? When he was a child, every time it snowed in winter, many children would run out of the house to have snowball fights. In the past, at this time, the little guy would lie on the window and watch with envy and yearning. However, because of his health, he was ordered to stay at home. Therefore, he could only envy. However, it was different now. With Gong Jie, Xiao Chen, and Wuxia as his playmates, he probably wouldn't feel lonely this winter. In the courtyard, the smoke of gunpowder filled the air and the flames of war raged on. Gong Jie and little Chen fought side by side in a ferocious battle. Wuxia too went all out. He was actually on par with the two of them alone. The four of them had a strong desire to win. Even though it was just a game, they gave it their all and didn't hold back at all. Xiao Chen saw that his father couldn't win, so he quickly aimed at Yu. Hence, he picked up a snowball and attacked Yu. Chapter 22-27. Yun Shirshir could not help feeling eager to give it a try. Just looking at it made her excited. Hence, she put on her gloves and scarf and sneaked into the yard. Without thinking, she joined Yu's team. Yu was excited when she saw her mommy. "Mommy, you're here too?" "Yeah. Mommy will play with you guys. Okay?" "Okay." Gong Jie was competing with Wuxia. The two tall and burly men were fighting, so they didn't notice Yu's team's reinforcements. Yun Shirshir picked up a snowball and threw it at Gong Jie. The snowball hit Gong Jie's neck. As he wasn't wearing a scarf, the snowball entered his collar with a whoosh. The frozen snowball slid into his clothes and stuck close to Gong Jie's warm skin. Gong Jie was so cold that he almost jumped up. He turned around murderously and saw Yun Shirshir smiling at him. She even beckoned him with her finger. "Bring it on. Sis, you're cheating." Gong Jie instantly complained aggrievedly. "It's not fair to have 3 people against 2. Yeah, Mommy, you're biased. You're helping Yu and not helping me." Little Chen wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. He pursed his lips, feeling extremely wronged. Yun Shirshir couldn't bear to see this. She quickly shifted her center of gravity, picked up a snowball, and threw it at Wuxia. Wuxia had originally treated her as a teammate. He didn't expect that his backyard would be on fire and he would be ambushed by his own family. However, he didn't show any mercy. He picked up a snowball and chased after her. Yu piled the snowballs together and joined the battle. However, because of Yun Shirshir's participation in the team, the balance was completely destroyed. In the end, there were no clear teams. In the courtyard, Yun Shirshir quickly switched sides and chased after Gong Jie with Yu. Gong Jie couldn't bear to hit her. Hence, he threw snowballs at Wuxia with all his might. Wuxia, on the other hand, chased after little Chen and threw snowballs at him. Xiao Chen couldn't beat Wuxia, so he could only aim at Yu. The group of people chased each other and fought each other until they were all in a mess. Snowballs were flying around in the air. Amidst the falling snowflakes, the sound of laughter was reverberating. It was incomparably joyful. "Uncle, don't run. Ah, Mommy, catch up. Ah, Wawa, it's so cold." The snowballs are in my clothes. As Xiao Yichen ran, he suddenly tripped over the snowballs that Yu had piled up. He fell face first onto the ground. Yu, who was chasing after Xiao Yichen, couldn't stop in time. She tripped over Yichen, who was lying on the ground, and fell onto Xiao Yichen like a human pyramid. Xiao Yichen instantly felt a weight on his body. He sank deeper into the thick snow. Yun Shirshir laughed out loud when she saw this. Just as she laughed, Gong Jie threw a snowball at her. It flew directly into her wide-open mouth. Yun Shirshir ate a mouthful of snow. Mu Yaja was furious when he saw this. How dare you bully my wife? He squatted down and quickly picked up for snowballs. Then he threw them at Gong Jie's face. Gong Jie couldn't dodge in time. He was hit squarely and fell to the ground. Yun Shirshir saw a good opportunity. She picked up a snowball and threw it at Gong Jie, who was lying on the ground. Wah. Stop hitting me. Gong Jie begged for mercy. Chapter 22-28. However, how could Yun Shirshir let him off the hook? She picked up a snowball and threw it at him. Even Mu Yaja couldn't stand it anymore. A snowball flew toward her. This time it was Yun Shirshir's turn to be on fire. She glared at Mu Yaja angrily. Then the couple started fighting. Mu Yaja couldn't bear to be ruthless to her. He didn't dare to retaliate and ran away from her attacks. Xiao Yichen clapped and cheered when he saw that someone had finally stepped forward to teach his arrogant daddy a lesson. Gong Jie quickly got up from the ground and joined forces with Xiao Yichen. They picked up a snowball and chased after Mu Yaja while throwing it at him. The pitiful Mu Yaja was attacked by the three of them at the same time. Yu got up and looked at the scene. He shook his head and sighed. His heart ached as he said, "Daddy is so pitiful." As soon as he finished speaking, he picked up a snowball and joined Yun Shirshir in attacking Mu Yaja. This time, Mu Yaja's backyard was on fire. He was chased by the four of them. In the end, Mu Yaja didn't even have time to make a snowball. He grabbed the snow on the ground and attacked the four of them. However, he wasn't a god. No matter how powerful he was, he couldn't withstand the attacks of the four of them. Furthermore, the team had Gong Jie and Little Yichen, who were highly skilled fighters. Soon, he was defeated and fell to the ground under the four men's attacks. Ha. Xiao Yichen felt that he had vented his anger and clapped his hands. Mu Yaja stood up gloomily. Gong Jie rushed forward and wiped his face with a snowball. Ha. After the snowball fight, the five of them returned to the house. Xiao Yichen complained that his hands were cold and wanted to quickly get a basin of hot water to soak his hands. Yun Shirshir immediately stopped her. You can't soak in hot water. If you soak in hot water after the snow is removed, you'll easily get frostbite. But my hand is a little cold, Xiao Yichen said pitifully. Yun Shirshir squatted down in front of him and held his hand gently. She carefully rubbed his little hand and blew on it before rubbing it again. Do you feel better now? Yes, I feel a little better. Yun Shirshir smiled at him and continued to rub his hands. However, not long after, two pairs of hands suddenly stretched out in front of her. Yun Shirshir looked up in surprise and saw Gong Jie and Yu standing in front of her. Gong Jie beamed and said coquettishly, "Sis, my hands are cold too. Help me rub them too." He was jealous of Mu Yichen's special treatment and couldn't wait to receive Yun Shirshir's gentle care. However, before Yun Shirshir could say anything, another pair of large hands suddenly reached over and wrapped around his hands. Gong Jie's lips twitched violently. He turned around expressionlessly and saw Mu Yaja coldly grabbing his hands and rubbing them. "I'll rub them for you." "I don't want to." Gong Jie resentfully withdrew his hands with a look of disdain. Ha. Uncle despises daddy. Yu laughed. After resting for a while, Yun Shirshir brought the dumpling fillings and wrappers to the table and called out, "Let's make dumplings together." The highlight of New Year's Eve was the family sitting together and making dumplings together. Gong Jie and Mu Yaja also sat down and made dumplings together. However, the two men had never done any household chores and rarely had the chance to cook. How could they know how to make dumplings? They held up the dumpling wrappers and looked confused. Chapter 22-29. Daddy, I'll teach you. Yu spread open the dumpling wrapper and used her chopsticks to spread the filling in the center. Soon a dumpling was formed. Mommy, why must we eat dumplings during the New Year? Yun Shirshir explained. This is called New Year's dumplings. Dumplings are like ingots and symbolize wealth. They are also round and symbolize family reunion. Moreover, the dumplings on New Year's Eve are filled with meat. The dumplings are full and symbolize prosperity, peace, and prosperity. Xiao Yichen nodded his head half-heartedly. Oh, so there's such a saying. After Yun Shirshir taught Xiao Yichen step by step, she turned around and saw Gong Jie staring at the dumpling wrapper with a bitter look on his face. It was obvious that he knew nothing about making dumplings. Mu Yaja, on the other hand, had finished making the dumplings under Yu Yu's guidance. However, the first dumpling could only be considered as a half-finished product as there was too much water and the dumpling wrapper broke. Yu Yu said in disdain, "Daddy, you're so stupid." Mu Yaja was instantly dealt a blow and said in shame, "Daddy has been made dumplings before. My first time making dumplings, but they look good." Yu Yu did not give Mu Yaja a way out. Mu Yaja was thoroughly depressed. Yun Shirshir sat beside Gong Jie and taught him step by step. Under her guidance, Gong Jie actually managed to make the dumplings well. Before they knew it, it was already 6 p.m. Yun Yeching walked downstairs and saw that the dumplings were already made on the table. Yun Shirshir and Yu Yu were busy in the kitchen. Mu Yaja was in charge of assisting, while Gong Jie and Xiao Yichen were watching TV in the living room. There would be a spring festival gala on New Year's Eve. Although it was not time yet, it was already being previewed and replayed last year's gala. What about Xiang Yu and the other two? Yun Yeching realized that the mother-daughter pair was no longer around, but after giving it some thought, he guessed that the three of them were tactful enough to return home. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the reunion dinner was ready. Yun Shirshir stood at the door and looked around for a while. She waited bitterly for a long time, but there was still no sign of Hua Jin. Could it be that he had forgotten? She returned to the house in disappointment. Hua Jin took a taxi to Shanti Walk. According to the address sent by Yun Shirshir, he found his way there. Standing at the door, through the floor-to-ceiling window, he could easily see the harmonious scene in the living room. The family of 6 sat around the table, laughing and chatting happily. It was a happy and harmonious atmosphere. He couldn't help but feel envious. Envy and yearning rose from the bottom of his heart. How many years had it been since he spent the new year with his family like this? As far as he knew, there was no concept of celebrating the new year. He was homeless, to begin with, so such a scene could only be an extravagant wish for him. Hua Jin walked to the door and reached out to press the doorbell, but just as he reached out, he realized that he did not have the courage to press the doorbell. He furrowed his brows and retracted his hand guiltily. He blew on his hand and rubbed it gently. Outside the house, heavy snow was swirling in the air. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. It was as if countless cotton balls were floating in the air. Hua Jin was wearing a coat and a scarf. The fluttering snow landed on his body and face. Standing in the snow for a long time, even his eyelashes were lightly covered with a thin layer of snow. With just a gentle blink, the snow fell from his eyelashes and was blown away by the wind. Chapter 2230. He yearned for it but didn't dare to step in, as he felt like a foreigner with nowhere to return home. Hua Jin slowly took a step back and returned to the courtyard. Through the French windows, he stood there quietly for a long time, silently looking at the harmonious scene in the house. While he was envious, he also felt that he shouldn't disturb such a warm moment. He probably wouldn't be welcomed, right? He didn't dare to imagine that when he walked in, those pairs of doubtful, repulsive, or conflicted gazes would be directed at him. Just the thought of it made him feel exceptionally uneasy and helpless, so it made him feel awkward and even more nervous. At the same time that his heart was uneasy and timid, there was also a kind of loneliness. Would such a warm light be lit for him? Because of this flustered state of mind, he ultimately didn't have the courage to step in. Turning around, like a deserter, he actually wanted to quickly escape from this place. Hua Jin had just turned around when a voice sounded from behind him. "Hua Jin, Hua Jin's back view paused as he turned around in shock. But he saw Yun Shirshir had unknowingly opened the door and was standing at the doorway, looking at him with a joyful and coquettish expression on her face. Why are you only here now? Hua Jin looked at her helplessly, not knowing what to say. He had actually arrived earlier but with an inexplicable uneasy feeling. He paced back and forth outside the door for a long time, ultimately unable to muster up the courage to step in. Yun Shirshir walked towards him and pulled his hand reproachfully. You're here so late. Everyone's waiting for you and the hot dishes haven't been served yet. Quickly come in. Shirshir. Before Hua Jin could express his opinion, Yun Shirshir had already held his hand and walked into the house. Wait a minute. Hua Jin stood still with some apprehension, seeming to be a little uneasy. Yun Shirshir turned around in astonishment, only to see his desolate expression which made one's heart ache as he stammered, Everyone, will everyone welcome me? Oh. Yun Shirshir was stabbed by his disappointed expression, and her heart ached. However, Hua Jin smiled awkwardly and said quietly, I'm afraid I'll disturb you, Shirshir. How about, what are you talking about? Yun Shirshir tenderly held his hand and smiled charmingly. Everyone is waiting for you. That one sentence touched his heart all of a sudden. Hua Jin's eyes widened in surprise as he looked at her in disbelief. Really? Yes. Yun Shirshir continued. You're the only one left. After the New Year's Eve dinner, let's go to the riverside to set off fireworks. We've already made an appointment. You can't break it. Hua Jin's heart skipped a beat, and a warm current flowed into his heart without any warning. Yun Shirshir didn't care about his concerns and led him into the house. Hua Jin didn't struggle or avoid her and allowed her to lead him into the living room. The heater was turned on in the spacious living room. When he was surrounded by the warm lights, his mind suddenly turned white. Looking at the people sitting around the table, he suddenly didn't know how to react. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. Let me introduce you. This is my friend Hua Jin. Shaoi Chen was the first to stand up when he saw him. Oh, Mommy said that a friend would be coming over tonight. Is that brother Hua Jin? I know him. The male lead of Lethal Beauty. Chapter 2231. Yun Shirshir had already told them beforehand that she would be having New Year's Eve dinner with an important friend tonight. Naturally, Mu Yaja recognized him. His lips curled into a smile to express his friendliness. Gong Jie did not say anything, but there was no repulsion on his face. Instead, he consciously emptied the seat beside him. Shaoi Chen, on the other hand, stood up, carried a stool, and placed it beside Gong Jie. He greeted, Brother Hua Jin, have a seat. I'll get you a bowl and chopsticks. As he spoke, the little guy nimbly brought a bowl and chopsticks from the kitchen. Yun Shirshir pushed Hua Jin to the table and sat down. Yun Yeching sized him up, then smiled and said cheerfully, Shirshir, is this your friend who's acting with you? Yes. Dad, he used to be in the same production team as me and took good care of me. He's considered my senior. Yun Yeching immediately said, Aya, this young man is so handsome. He's prettier than the girls. Hello. Thank you for taking care of our Shirshir. After a few words of greeting, the atmosphere became harmonious. Hua Jin's blank mind was injected with a trace of vitality, and the uneasiness quickly dissipated. He greeted them one by one. His mouth was sweet, and he coaxed Yun Yeching happily. Yun Shirshir also sat down. As she picked up food for him, she rebuked, I wanted you to come earlier so that we could make dumplings together. Hua Jin smiled and was about to explain. Mu Yaja suddenly turned to ask him, Can you drink? Hua Jin immediately replied reservedly, Yes, I can drink a little. Mu Yaja immediately poured him a glass of dry red wine. Yun Shirshir's eyes widened as she watched. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. Hey, are you trying to get him drunk? He won't get drunk with this little bit of wine, right? Mu Yaja said confidently. He said that he would drink a little, which means that he still has some strength left. Besides, it's not that easy to get drunk with red wine. Hua Jin added, Shirshir, I can hold my liquor. Don't worry. Yun Shirshir was relieved. Gong Jie suddenly complained, "Sister, why don't you care about me? Will brother-in-law make me drunk?" Yun Shirshir glanced at the white wine glass in Gong Jie's hand. She chuckled and asked, "Aren't you good at drinking? I've already drunk 2 glasses. Brother-in-law's alcohol tolerance is really not for show. I feel that if I continue drinking like this, I'll be ruined by him." Mu Yaja snorted coldly. He picked up the white wine bottle and filled Gong Jie's glass to the brim. "Gong Jie," Mu Yaja said gently, "brother-in-law, we're not going home until we're drunk tonight." Gong Jie immediately cried out in grievance, "Brother-in-law, you must be doing this on purpose. Are you trying to get me drunk and then leave me alone at home to set off fireworks without me?" This brat's brain is very bright. He had actually figured out his motive. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and seemed to be provoking him. "Don't get drunk if you dare." Gong Jie was speechless. His eyebrows twitched and he was instantly inspired. "Humph, humph, humph. I'd like to see who will be the one to fall tonight." With that said, the 2 of them picked up their wine glasses and started drinking again. The table was full of chatter and laughter. Hua Jin stared at this scene in a daze, and a warm smile involuntarily appeared on his lips. In his memory, his thoughts seemed to have been spent in his father's drunkenness and violence. Every New Year, every family was happy and harmonious. Chapter 2232. Every New Year's Eve, his father's mood seemed to get worse. Every New Year's Eve, he would always come home drunk and drag him out of bed. Then, whether it was with a belt or a hanger, he would be beaten black and blue. B*****. Your mother is a B****tch, and so is your son. Your mother harmed me, and now you're doing the same to me, aren't you? Are you feeling smug seeing me like this? Are you happy? I'll beat you to death. I'll beat you to death, you little B*****. His father's roar seemed to be echoing in his ears. That hideous and distorted face seemed to still be in his mind. Hua Jin came back to his senses from his memories. When he looked up, the long-lost warmth enveloped him once more. He suddenly smiled and raised his wrist. "Thank you for your hospitality. Let me toast everyone." Tonight, he was no longer as arrogant and domineering as he was on set. Instead, he was as humble and polite as a child, unbelievably well-behaved. Yun Shirshir thought to herself, this is probably how he was in the beginning. He's innocent and pure without a trace of pretense. After the New Year's Eve dinner, Gong Jie was already a little tipsy, but he was only a little tipsy. It turned out that Mu Yaja's alcohol tolerance was better than his father's, but what surprised everyone the most was Hua Jin's alcohol tolerance. He drank quite a lot and, under Gong Jie's persuasion, drank a lot of alcohol for Gong Jie. He drank more than half a liter of white wine, but he had no reaction at all. Yun Shirshir was shocked. This guy's alcohol tolerance is so good. Mu Yaja also drank more than half a liter of white wine, but he still had no reaction. It was as if that liter of white wine was just plain water. After the New Year's Eve dinner, the family went to the riverside to set off fireworks. Yun Yeqing, on the other hand, said that he would stay at home to take care of his brother. The weather outside was chilly. There was still some sunlight during the day, but at night, the wind was even colder. Yun Yeho's legs could not stand the cold and would often ache. Hence, he could not go out to set off fireworks, so Yun Yeqing stayed at home to take care of him. Yun Shirshir did not insist. Hence, she drove the car full of people to the riverside. When the 6 of them arrived at the riverside, it was already 11:30 p.m. Many people had already come to the riverside. Many of them were preparing to set off fireworks, while some of them were just here to watch the fireworks. Every New Year's Eve, people would tacitly gather by the riverside because the city restricted fireworks and firecrackers. However, the control by the riverside was lax. Because it was near the riverside, there were no major hidden dangers and basically no one cared. Yun Shirshir bought a lot of fireworks, including large artistic fireworks. Mu Yaja and Gong Jie set up the fireworks and waited for the countdown to the new year to pass. They would set off the fireworks at midnight. However, before that, of course, he needed to do some warming up. There were also many small fireworks for viewing and playing. Xiaoyichen, who had never set off fireworks on New Year's Eve, was so excited that he chased after Yun Shishir, shouting for fireworks. Yun Shishir gave him a fireworks stick. Xiaoyichen held it in his hand, but he was confused and did not know how to light it. Yu muttered, "Idiot, haven't you set off a fireworks stick before?" "No, I haven't." Xiaoyichen felt wronged. "This is my first time." Yun Shishir laughed and walked over to him. She stopped beside him and gently taught him, "Hold the end. Yes, hold it like this. Don't point the end at yourself." "Okay." Chapter 22:33. As she spoke, she carefully lit a match and aimed it at the fuse. Soon, with a sizzling sound, the fuse was ignited and sparks flew in all directions. Xiaoyichen excitedly held the end of the fireworks stick tightly. However, he was so nervous that he didn't dare to move, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Soon, the fireworks lit up. Colorful fireworks shot out one by one, illuminating his tender face. "Wow, it's so beautiful!" Xiaoyichen exclaimed in shock and excitement. Soon, Yun Shishir also lit up a fireworks stick for Yu. However, unlike Xiaoyichen, Yu wasn't as nervous and helpless as Yu was when he set off fireworks for the first time. He calmly held the fireworks stick and gently waved it in the air. The colorful fireworks danced in the night sky, forming a gorgeous streamline. It was beautiful and compelling. When Xiaoyichen saw that fireworks could be played like this, he excitedly imitated Yu and waved it. The two little guys were overjoyed. Hua Jin was originally standing at the side and watching in a daze. Yun Shishir suddenly handed him a fireworks stick and smiled. "Hua Jin, let's do it together?" "Okay." Hua Jin took the firecracker from her, and she lit it for him. The colorful fireworks lit up his smiling face in an instant. Hua Jin held the fireworks stick and waved it gently as he leaned against the river. Gong Jie and Mu Yaja also took out a more beautiful type of fireworks and set it off. "Ha ha ha!" Xiaoyichen quickly finished setting off the fireworks in his hand. When he turned around and saw the fireworks in Gong Jie's hand, he was extremely envious. "Wow, wow, wow! The fireworks set off by Uncle are so beautiful. I want to set them off too. I want to set them off too." Gong Jie walked over and carried Xiaoyichen with one hand. He handed the fireworks in his hand to him. "Here, take it, you can play with it." "Thank you, Uncle." Xiaoyichen beamed with joy and waved the fireworks stick in the air. After you finished setting off the fireworks, Yun Shishir passed the fireworks in her hand to him to play with. Hua Jin stood at the side and watched as Yun Shishir hugged Yu and set off the fireworks with a smile. He felt as though his heart had been cut open and was burning. It was at this moment that Hua Jin suddenly felt that Yun Shishir's world, be it her or her surroundings, was emitting an incomparably dazzling light. He desperately wanted and longed to enter his world. Even he didn't realize that Yun Shishir's every move was like a level 10 tornado. It was so powerful that it disturbed his mood. At that moment, he felt like a young boy who had just experienced love for the first time. His emotions were so high that it felt like a dam was about to burst. Hua Jin stared at Yun Shishir's back view in a daze. Unknowingly, tears streamed down his face. Yun Shishir glanced back and was about to ask Hua Jin to join her when she saw him standing silently behind her. Against the backdrop of the fireworks, there was a clear tear stain on his face. It was a ghastly sight. She was shocked. She put Yu down and walked up to him. However, she saw Hua Jin staring at her in a daze. His large eyes were faintly moist. "Hua Jin, what's wrong with you?" Yun Shishir reached out and gently wiped away his tears. She was a little flustered as she asked, "What's wrong with you? Why are you crying?" "Crying? Was he crying?" Chapter 22:34. What's wrong? Yun Shishir felt even more helpless. Hua Jin immediately shook his head and explained, "It's nothing. I'm fine." "Then, why are you crying?" Hua Jin said dejectedly, "I'm just a little envious of him." Yun Shishir followed his line of sight and turned around. only to see the back of little Yichen and Yu standing together. She was suddenly acutely aware of the actor's current state of mind and came to a realization. He was probably envious of Yu and Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen and Yu are so happy. I'm just a little envious of them. Hua Jin chuckled softly, but there was a hint of bitterness in his smile. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips, turned around, and leaned against him. She silently watched Xiao Yichen and Yu's carefree backs. For some reason, the two little guys started playing around again, chasing each other. Yu chased after Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen cleverly hid behind Muyaja. The two little guys ran around Muyaja, chasing after each other. Muyaja couldn't stand it anymore. He reached out and carried Xiao Yichen, placing him on his shoulder. Taking advantage of Muyaja's height, Xiao Yichen smiled proudly and made a funny face at Yu. Yu was naturally indignant. He ran over and tugged at Gong Jie's sleeve. No one knew what he said, but Gong Jie lifted Yu high above his head and made him sit on his shoulder. Yu commanded Gong Jie as though he was a steed. Then, the two little guys continued to play around with each other. Xiao Yichen didn't hit Yu too hard because he knew that he was strong. If he really hit Yu would definitely cry. Hence, he went easy on him. However, Yu didn't show any mercy. He hit Xiao Yichen so hard that he cried out in pain. Gong Jie laughed heartily and encouraged Yu to bully Xiao Yichen. Muyaja couldn't stand it anymore. Seeing that his eldest son didn't live up to his expectations, he lifted Xiao Yichen and ran away. Carrying Yu, Gong Jie chased after them. The four of them, 2 adults and 2 children, were in an uproar. Yun Shirshir immediately said, "Hey, don't mess around. Be careful not to fall." Hua Jin was so amused that he laughed. Suddenly he said gently, "Shirshir, do you know? I envy them for having such a gentle father and mother." Yun Shirshir glanced at Hua Jin. Then, she silently looked at the messy scene. Suddenly, she laughed gently. "If I were Hua Jin's mother, I would definitely dote on Hua Jin a lot." Hua Jin was stunned for a moment. He turned his head in surprise and looked at her. At that moment, Yun Shirshir was staring at Muyaja and Gong Jie, as well as the backs of the 2 little guys chasing each other. Her gaze was unbelievably gentle. This was probably the radiance of motherhood. Looking at her own child, her eyes were filled with tenderness. This tenderness could melt even the coldest heart. All of a sudden, Yun Shirshir heard Hua Jin's desolate and envious voice. "I also wish that I was Shirshir's child. I also wish that I was Shirshir's child." Yun Shirshir's heart ached at these helpless and disappointed words. She turned her head and suddenly reached out to gently hold Hua Jin's hand, holding it tightly. "Hua Jin, in the future, celebrate Chinese New Year's Eve with us. Just like today, we'll make dumplings, have Chinese New Year's Eve dinner together, and set off fireworks together. Okay?" Chapter 22:35. Hua Jin's smile had a special kind of charm. There was a special kind of enchanting mist in his eyes. Usually, Yun Shirshir rarely saw him show much sincerity in his smile. In front of the camera, he smiled modestly and hypocritically. On the surface, he looked like a humble teenager. However, when the camera turned, in the blink of an eye, the contempt and boredom in the corner of his eyes made that smile look especially ironic. In the crew, his smile became arrogant and insufferably arrogant, like a little demon king, like a rebellious child. Whether it was the director, the actors, or even the extras, he seemed to be deliberately angering them. He spoke ill of them until they were sad, and then he showed an expression of success. But immediately, another kind of indescribable sense of loss and loneliness would appear in his eyes. This kind of loneliness, like an isolated child, tried to use the worst way to attract anyone's attention, to get other people's care and flattery, even if it was hypocritical. But at this moment, when Yun Shirshir turned her head and looked at Hua Jin, she saw him looking at the night sky. His eyes were like hidden stars, bright and shining. This seemed to be his true appearance. Naive, innocent, and simple like a child who didn't know anything about the world. There was no longer a sharp edge on him, and he was so white that he was not stained with any dazzling colors. He said, "I also hope that I am Shirshir's child." It sounded like a very normal thing to say, but from his tone, Yoon Shirshir could hear a bit of helplessness and yearning. This kind of helplessness and yearning made her heart ache inexplicably. She had never been a person who was overflowing with love. She hated those clichés and hypocrisy. But her love for Hua Jin, under Hua Jin's smiling gaze, the pain in her heart suddenly overflowed and overflowed. She couldn't help but hold his hand tightly. She just wanted to give him as much warmth as possible on such a cold night. A trace of insignificant warmth. Yoon Shirshir looked up at the sky. At this time, there were already people who couldn't hold back their excitement and lit up the fireworks in advance. She couldn't help but think of her childhood. She still remembered the first New Year she spent with the Yoon family. She still remembered that Yoon Yeching had specially bought a lot of fireworks to set off that year. Some of them were very expensive, easily costing a few hundred yuan. There were even some big and beautiful ones that cost a few thousand yuan. Ordinary families would not bear to set them off. Usually, only those who were slightly wealthier would buy them. At that time, the Yoon family was still very wealthy, and Yoon Yeching's career was at its peak. Hence, the fireworks he bought were the most beautiful ones. The New Year's Eve of more than 10 years ago was not like it was now. The streets and alleys were brimming with a strong festive atmosphere. Setting off fireworks was one of the most anticipated New Year's activities. The beauty and splendor of fireworks was the dream of many children. On New Year's Eve, Yoon Na pestered Yoon Yeching to set off fireworks. Alas, Yoon Yeching insisted on releasing it on New Year's Eve. That night, Yoon Na secretly moved a set of fireworks from home. She dragged Yoon Shirshir out and asked her to show it to her. Chapter 22:36. When she heard that, she nodded fearfully and took a match to light it. However, due to her lack of experience, the fuse was not completely lit and was blown out by the wind. Only a small part of the fuse was left. Yoon Na scolded her and asked her to continue lighting it. Yoon Shirshir braced herself and went forward to take a look. Then, she tried to light it with a lighter in fear. However, the fireworks that suddenly shot up into the sky almost blew up her eyes. Because of this, it left a huge shadow in her heart. Since then, she only dared to set off simple fireworks, such as firework sticks and sparks. Thinking of this, Yoon Shirshir could not help but laugh. She suddenly asked, "Hua Jin, did you set off fireworks when you were young?" "Yeah, I did." Hua Jin nodded and then said, "However, I rarely had the chance to go out to play during the New Year. Most of the time, I could only lie on the balcony and watch other people set off fireworks. I'm still a little traumatized by fireworks." "What's wrong?" "Because when I set off fireworks when I was young, it almost blew up my eyes." Yoon Shirshir paused and suddenly said half-jokingly, "So, from then on, I didn't dare to set off large fireworks because I was afraid that it would blow up my eyes." Hua Jin suddenly turned his head and looked at her. He blinked and said, "Actually, setting off fireworks is not scary. Just be careful and it'll be fine." Yoon Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry. She said, "Even though that's what I think, I'm still scared." Hua Jin suddenly held her hand. "Don't be scared. If you accidentally get blown up, you still have me." "You?" Yoon Shirshir did not understand the meaning behind his words. Hua Jin suddenly said seriously, "Yeah, if you can't see, I'll be your eyes." If she could not see, he would be her eyes. Yoon Shirshir was stunned for a moment. She widened her eyes slightly and then smiled gently. "Okay, but there won't be such a day." At that time, Yoon Shirshir only took his words as a joke. However, after a long time, when she suddenly recalled that year's New Year's Eve and Hua Jin's serious promise, she couldn't help but sigh. It turned out that every word he said to her was sincere from the bottom of his heart. However, this was all in the future. 11:55 p.m. At this moment, countless citizens had gathered by the river. Many people gathered here to welcome the New Year's bell. Some brought the elderly and children with them in high spirits. Some brought young and loving couples. Their only purpose was to welcome the gorgeous fireworks at the moment the New Year's bell rang. Gong Jie raised his wrist and looked at his watch. As the countdown approached, his handsome face showed a bit of excitement and expectation. "Sis, It's almost 12. When Xiao Chen and Yu Yu heard this, they looked at each other and smiled. Both of them were jumping up and down excitedly. Yun Shirshir smiled and said, "Who's going to be in charge of lighting the fireworks later? I rarely light fireworks, so I don't know much about it." Just as Gong Jie finished speaking, Xiao Chen raised his hand enthusiastically. "I'll do it. I'll light it." However, Yu Yu said softly, "Hey, it's too dangerous. You're so clumsy. Be careful not to get hurt by the explosion." This reminder was a form of concern in disguise. Chapter 2237. It was just fireworks. He was not afraid of that. In fact, he was looking forward to lighting the fireworks himself. That was because lighting the fireworks himself and sending them into the night sky would give him a great sense of accomplishment. Moreover, it was just fireworks. He had even played with rocket launchers before, so to him, fireworks were nothing more than an interesting toy. It was not a problem at all. Yu Yu raised his eyebrows and suddenly realized that Mui Chen was not comparable to those ordinary kids. He had seen his abilities and knew that he was crazy. Lighting fireworks was nothing to him. "All right, you're in charge of lighting the fireworks. We'll be in charge of watching." Yu Yu was relieved, but he still reminded him cautiously, "However, you still have to be careful. The power of the fireworks is not to be underestimated. Okay?" "I know." Xiao Chen was not grateful at all. He nagged, "Why are you acting like a busybody?" Yu Yu was unhappy when he heard that. He said coldly, "Humph, you don't know how to appreciate my kindness. If you hurt yourself later, don't cry for your parents. I won't feel bad for you." Then Yu Yu ran proudly to Yun Shirshir's side. He hugged Yun Shirshir's arm and waited for the countdown to start. 11:59 p.m. The last minute. Suddenly, the townsfolk gathered by the riverside and started counting down in unison. 10, 9, 8, 7. Xiao Chen shouted excitedly, "Daddy, it's time to light the fireworks." Mu Yaja leaned against the railing by the riverside. When he heard the commotion, his lips curled into a smile. He casually picked up a cigarette from his lips and walked over. He rubbed Xiao Chen's head and passed him the cigarette. Xiao Chen took the cigarette butt and chased him to the side. "Daddy, be careful." Mu Yaja walked to Yun Shirshir's side. He reached out and gently hugged Yu Yu in his arms. His other hand gently hugged Yun Shirshir's shoulder. 3, 2, 1. Bah! Walala. At the moment when midnight arrived, countless fireworks rose into the sky, as if there was some kind of magical tacit understanding. In the dark night sky, dazzling sparks exploded one after another. Xiao Chen covered his ears and ran back. Behind him, fireworks lit up half of the starry sky. More and more people gathered by the river. Xiao Chen tiptoed and could not see clearly. Suddenly, a pair of hands reached out from behind. Gong Jie picked up Xiao Chen and placed him on his shoulder, supporting him firmly with one hand. "Can you see it clearly now?" "Yes, I can see it clearly." Gong Jie smiled and then muttered unhappily, "Kid, you're quite heavy." Xiao Chen, on the other hand, was sitting on his left shoulder with a clear conscience. She held his arm and excitedly watched the countless fireworks rising from the riverside. Ba ba. Yun Shirshir was engrossed in watching the fireworks. Mu Yaja suddenly pulled her into his arms, nodded, and kissed her forehead affectionately. "Madam, Happy New Year." Yun Shirshir's heart skipped a beat because of this sudden tenderness. She looked up and met Mu Yaja's gentle eyes. Her face blushed and her eyes revealed a seductive look. Yun Shirshir responded with an but Mu Yaja suddenly lowered his head and kissed her lips uncontrollably. Chapter 2238. Yu Yu caught a glimpse of this intimate scene and blushed. She covered her eyes shyly and forced herself not to look. See no evil, hear no evil. Even though she kept telling herself not to look, the little fellow couldn't resist her curiosity. She secretly opened her fingers and peeked at this tender scene through her fingers. Xiao Chen also caught a glimpse of this scene and suddenly tugged at Gong Jie's hair excitedly. "Uncle, look!" Gong Jie hissed in pain, but when he looked in the direction little Chen was pointing, he saw a heart-pounding scene. His handsome brows knitted together in a frown. He walked over unhappily. Just as Wuxia was about to kiss her again, Gong Jie boldly reached out and blocked their faces. Wuxia was caught off guard, and a kiss landed on Gong Jie's palm. Ha ha ha! Yu burst into laughter when she saw this. Wuxia suddenly looked up and glared fiercely at Gong Jie. He said coldly, "What are you doing? Hey, we're in public. Why can't brother-in-law take note of his image?" Gong Jie mocked him with hostility. Humph! How dare he secretly kiss his sister when he wasn't paying attention? If the two of them were being intimate, they should at least avoid a sister-con like him. Why don't you consider my feelings? Yun Shirshir was so embarrassed that her neck turned red when she heard this. She turned her head away awkwardly, cleared her throat, and pretended that nothing had happened. What image? Wuxia said confidently, "I'm kissing my wife. It's none of your business." It was a simple sentence, but it left Gong Jie speechless. Yu laughed dauntlessly and almost fell off Wuxia's shoulder. Wuxia smacked him on the buttocks. "Behave yourself." Shaoichen pouted and complained, "Daddy, that's not right. Shouldn't the first kiss of the new year be given to your precious son? If you give mommy a kiss, what about me? I want a kiss too." Wuxia's lips curled into a smile. "All right." As he spoke, Wuxia suddenly leaned forward slightly and reached out his hand. His slender hand gently lifted Shaoichen's chin. He tilted his head slightly and gently kissed the corner of Shaoichen's lips. Boom! A loud sound rang out. Little Ichen's face was so red that it looked as if blood was about to drip from it. He had only said it casually, but this stupid daddy of his actually took it seriously. He even gave him such a kiss. His every move was bewitching and charming. He was even more bewitching than those male gods in idol dramas. Especially the smile in his eyes. It killed everything in an instant. Have you ever seen a father flirt with his son? Have you? Little Ichen let out a yelp as he jumped down from his uncle's lap. Covering his face with his hands, he ran away shyly. "You're so annoying. Daddy is flirting with me." Wuxia was silent. Yun Shirshir was so amused that she burst into laughter. She laughed so hard that tears almost came out of her eyes. Shaoichen was such a clown. Did the heavens send him here to make fun of her? Gong Jie felt even more indignant when he saw her laugh. He snorted coldly. "Sister, you're so biased. You give brother-in-law a kiss and not me a kiss. You're not a child anymore?" Yun Shirshir said, feeling speechless. Gong Jie said coquettishly, "No, sister. To be fair, hurry up and kiss me." As he spoke, he closed his eyes and moved his fair face closer. He tapped his face with his finger and said, "Kiss here." Chapter 2239. Yun Shirshir's antennae twitched violently. However, in the next second, Wuxia turned Gong Jie's face and grabbed his chin. Then, he leaned over and gave him a peck on the cheek. When Gong Jie came back to his senses, he opened his eyes. When he saw the culprit in front of him, he instantly jumped up and rubbed his cheek in disgust. He said angrily, "What are you doing?" Wuxia smiled mischievously and said provocatively, "Brother-in-law, are you satisfied with this kiss?" "You." Gong Jie flew into a rage out of humiliation and spat, "Pervert!" Then he threw a punch at his face. Wuxia dodged it nimbly and said scornfully, "Heh! You can't hit me." When Yu saw that Gong Jie was really angry, she quickly grabbed Wuxia's hand and ran away with her father. "Daddy, run. Uncle is going to beat you up." "Pervert. Stop right there. Don't run." Gong Jie waved his fist and chased after him. Behind him, Yun Shirshir and Hua Jin were left in a mess. They stood there dumbfounded and only reacted after a while. They held their stomachs and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha. By the river, the fireworks set off the night scene, which was mesmerizing and beautiful. When they returned home after setting off the fireworks, it was already past 2 o'clock in the morning. Hua Jin originally wanted to go home early, but Yun Shirshir said that they wanted to stay up for the new year tonight so they could stay up together. After returning home, the two little fellows were naturally exhausted after such a commotion. However, Gong Jie and Mu Yaja were still energetic. Even after messing around for a while, they still looked energetic. Thus, Yun Shirshir was dragged by the two men to play cards. Hua Jin naturally joined them. After a few rounds of warm-ups, they had a good grasp of each other's abilities. Of course, some of them still held back. Xiao Chen was already asleep, but when Yu lay on the bed, she was wide awake and couldn't sleep. She heard the noise in the living room and walked out curiously. When she saw that they were playing Fight the Landlord, she wanted to join them. However, how could 5 people play Fight the Landlord? Hua Jin suddenly said, "Fight the landlord with 5 people. Fight the landlord." The rules were that after the cards were dealt, the landlord who had a card would play a card suit and draw a card. There were 2 decks of cards of each suit. On the other hand, the dark landlord, who had another suit, remained calm and collected. After confirming the identities of his teammates, he hid himself as a farmer and played the game silently, secretly helping the landlord side to win. After sizing up everyone, the other 4 expressed that they did not have any objections. And the loser, if there's no punishment, it's a little boring. This time, it was Yun Shirshir's turn to frown. How about we don't have to pay? It's the new year and I'm broke. I can't afford to lose. The 4 of them looked at her with disdain. Yu was speechless. Mommy, why do you sound like you're sure that you'll lose? Because I feel like we're not evenly matched. No matter how I look at it, the 4 of you look like seasoned casinos. I'm a newbie. If we really have to pay, I'll go bankrupt. Hua Jin, Mu Yaja, Gong Jie, and Yu were confused. Seasoned casinos? Yu comforted her. It's okay. I'm worse. I'll be your scapegoat. Chapter 2240. Gong Jie suddenly said evilly, "The loser will have to carry Yu once." Yu was unjustly implicated. He was unhappy and threw his cards. "Hey, uncle, are you punishing the loser or me?" Undersir. Smiley face. Angle. Sir. Gong Jie whistled. "Then the loser will have to take off his clothes." Mu Yaja looked at him coldly. Okay. What was there to be embarrassed about? Anyway, the heater was on in the living room. Yu was speechless. Anyway, other than Mommy, everyone here is a man. Daddy is not embarrassed. Gong Jie smiled sinisterly. It's not that simple. After taking off your clothes, you have to run naked outside the door. Everyone was silent. How much hatred. That was too cruel. Outside the window, it started to snow again. It was extremely cold. Mu Yaja threw his cards directly at his face. Since you like to run naked so much, do it yourself. Gong Jie was speechless. Hua Jin burst out laughing. Gong Jie suddenly looked over with a cold gaze. Everyone suddenly felt a gust of icy wind from Siberia. It was bone-chilling. Gong Jie suddenly said, "How about this? Whoever loses will jump down from the 2nd floor of the villa." Yun Shirshir flicked his forehead. "It's just a game of cards. Do you want to risk your life?" Hua Jin suddenly felt that this man was very scary. Gong Jie was hit by Yun Shirshir and said sadly, "This is how we play cards." Yun Shirshir said, "You're not human. We don't want to compete with you." Gong Jie said, "Sister, we came from the same womb. I'm not human. Are you a genetic mutant?" Yu laughed loudly. "That's right, Mommy. At least I came from your womb. If you're a genetic mutant, then what am I?" Yun Shirshir complained. "Both of you are not human." Yu was speechless. Gong Jie said, "Personal attacks are prohibited." Hua Jin suddenly suggested, "How about a dare?" When the 4 of them heard this, they had no objections. The first round began. Gong Jie shuffled the cards smoothly and skillfully. It was obvious that he had been in the casino before. Yun Shirshir was surprised to find that her younger brother, who couldn't even play cards properly when he was young, had learned to play cards very well after traveling abroad for more than 10 years. His action of cutting the cards was clean and neat. It seemed that he had practiced it before. There was a landlord in the light and a landlord in the dark. The open landlord who got the landlord card chose a pair of the same suit and called the dark landlord. The dark landlord hid among the other 4 people and secretly cooperated, which was the so-called traitor, and cooperated with the open landlord to achieve the final victory. In the first round, the landlord fell to Gong Jie. Gong Jie proudly called out, "Hidden landlord." Out of the corner of his eye, he sized up the other four people's expressions. All of them were veteran actors, and their expressions did not change at all. Gong Jie's cards were very good. Soon, there was only a single card left. The other four people were eyeing him covetously. As the next player, Yun Shishir sealed her cards tightly. However, the most interesting thing about the Open Landlord card and the Dark Landlord card was that other than the Open Landlord card, the other four people did not know who the Open Landlord card was. Yun Shishir was about to win, but Hua Jin, this pig of a teammate, made her stay at home. Seeing that there were no more cards left, the Open Landlord card appeared. The Open Landlord card quickly appeared. Yu, who was at the top of the Gong Jie card, played a trump card and secretly played Gong Jie's card. The Open Landlord card won the game. Yun Shishir was speechless. She looked at Yu and said gloomily, "No way! All four trump cards are in your hands? Xiao Jie, you didn't cheat when you dealt the cards, did you?" Chapter 2241. Hence, Yun Shishir was very suspicious. Gong Jie looked very hurt. "Sister, you have to accept your loss. Don't go back on your word after losing. Whoever cheats will have their hands chopped off." Hua Jin said, "It's so bloody. It's just a game of cards. How scary. You have to accept your loss." Mu Yaja threw the cards and glanced at Gong Jie. "Whoever wins gets to make a request." Hua Jin and Yun Shishir looked at Gong Jie and Yu's sinister faces and wished they could hug each other and chant the great compassion mantra. Gong Jie, on the other hand, flashed a dazzling smile as he pointed at Hua Jin and Mu Yaja flirtatiously. "Both of you go and do 10 push-ups." Yun Shishir pointed at herself curiously. "What about me?" Gong Jie said gently, "Sister, how can I bear to punish you? You can sit on brother-in-law's back." Yun Shishir was speechless. Mu Yaja had to complete 10 push-ups and Gong Jie wanted her to sit on Mu Yaja's back. Wouldn't that kill her? Although she wasn't fat because of her height, she still had some weight. Mu Yaja's eyes turned cold and he smiled casually. "Okay." With that, he stood up and casually unbuttoned his shirt sleeves and collar. "Madam, come on up." Yun Shishir's heart was pounding. She couldn't bear it and glanced at Gong Jie and Yu who were watching the show. "Xiao Jie, isn't this too cruel? How can it be?" Gong Jie said gloatingly, "Brother-in-law is so good. It's just 10 push-ups. He can definitely do it." Mu Yaja was speechless. Pervert. He was obviously going to torture him. He would remember this debt. Hua Jin was the first to finish 10 push-ups before returning to his position. Only then did Yun Shishir stand up hesitantly and walk to Mu Yaja's side. She carefully sat down and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Mu Yaja was just about to start when Gong Jie suddenly said viciously, "Sister, you're breaking the rules. Your feet can't touch the ground. You have to be completely off the ground." Everyone. His feet were completely off the ground? In that case, wouldn't all her weight be on him? Could he take it? Mu Yaja was so angry that he laughed. "Fine." Yun Shishir tried to lift her feet off the ground and sat on it. Mu Yaja's expression changed slightly and sank. Fortunately, when he was serving in the military, he had also completed weight push-ups training. At that time, the intensity of the training was definitely much higher than this. But after all, he had been away from the military for a long time. Usually, he paid attention to training and did not undergo such high-intensity training. "Brother-in-law, get ready to start. 10 push-ups, go for it." Yu cheered him on from the side. "Daddy, go for it." Mu Yaja started to do push-ups. 1, 2. Yu counted nervously. The first 5 push-ups were done smoothly. But when it came to the 6th, the speed slowed down. Every time he went down and got up, Mu Yaja's expression would change again and again. His posture was extremely accurate, but even though it took a lot of effort, he still managed to complete a set of 10 push-ups with difficulty. When he was done, Mu Yaja got up. His expression was rather ugly. He returned to his seat aggressively and took the initiative to shuffle the cards. Chapter 2242. He skillfully cut the cards and let Gong Jie pour the cards. Then, he stacked them on the table and said coldly, "Pick your own cards." It was obvious that he was suspecting Gong Jie of cheating. Yun Shishir had suspected that Gong Jie was cheating, but she was just joking. She was not serious at all. Mu Yaja clearly felt that the cards were not as simple as just luck. He must have cheated. When he observed carefully earlier, he felt that there was something fishy about his technique. Therefore, he was suspicious. In fact, Gong Jie often played in casinos, so his technique was extremely nimble. His skill was second to none. He could not be any better at poker. Gong Jie's dynamic vision was extremely good. Could be said that he was on par with Xiao Chen. The moment he shuffled the cards, he remembered the suit and the order of the cards in the blink of an eye. Then, he shuffled the cards and rearranged the suits. Then, he naturally distributed the good cards to his teammates. It seemed like a coincidence that Gong Jie secretly remembered all the suits in Yu Yu's pile of cards. Then, he deliberately called out to him. Yu Yu obviously saw it too, but he tacitly pretended not to know. However, Mu Yaja was also an experienced player. At first, when Gong Jie dealt the cards, he did not pay much attention. If he had been more alert and vigilant from the start, Gong Jie would not have had the chance to cheat. Gong Jie did not feel guilty. So what if he found out that he was cheating? If he did not catch him red-handed, it did not count. However, since he had been more vigilant, he could not cheat anymore. However, with his ability, it was not difficult for him to not cheat. He could not lose. Who knew what Mu Yaja would do to him if he lost? Earlier, he had only asked Mu Yaja to do a set of weighted push-ups to satisfy his appetite. Yet, he was already so serious. If he lost, he didn't know what kind of torture this old fox would come up with. Thus, when the second round began, everyone began to prepare. This was especially true for Hua Jin. He was only here for the fun of it. He didn't want to be dragged into the storm of war between brother-in-law and be reduced to cannon fodder. Yun Shishir was even more frightened. Her mind was filled with the scene of Mu Yaja carrying her on his back and doing push-ups. If she lost, she wouldn't even be able to get up, let alone a set. She could only think that no matter who she teamed up with, she could not become a burden. As soon as the match started, Gong Jie and Mu Yaja's aura changed completely. They were full of vigor, as if they were ready to kill Buddha. However, Yu Yu was not nervous. After all, he was neutral. He did not want to offend either side. Thus, no matter who won, he was not worried at all about being the target of revenge. In the second round, the open landlord was Hua Jin. Hua Jin had been picking and choosing. He had 2 big and small trump cards. He thought that since he was playing the landlord, he had to find a strong teammate. Thus, when he played a big trump card, the other person with a big trump card became the hidden landlord. He thought that if his teammate also had a trump card, the situation would be much better. His cards were not very smooth. Thus, in this round, he was on tenterhooks from the start. He could only hope that his teammate who was hiding in the dark would do a better job. Chapter 2243. However, the other drawback was that everyone knew that Hua Jin had a trump card. They would take this opportunity to raise their guard and not play a single card, which would put them at risk. Hua Jin glanced at the people in the room and saw that the other 4 people had different expressions. He could not tell which one was his teammate. Yun Shishir kept observing the situation. It was obvious that she was not the hidden landlord. Yu Yu, on the other hand, looked indifferent. He held a card in one hand and rested his chin on the other. His gaze was lazy. It was obvious that it was not him either. Mu Yaja and Gong Jie looked at each other with hostility. As the 2 most powerful people in the room, the 2 of them happened to be sitting on opposite sides. At that moment, the 2 of them were glaring at each other. Their gazes collided and sparks flew. Before the game started, it was necessary to observe the opponent. The foreplay had to be done. Soon, the hidden landlord came to the surface. Gong Jie played a trump card and blocked Yu Yu's small king. He was proud, as if he was very confident. Since he was willing to reveal his identity as the hidden landlord, he was very confident that he would win the game. He had always been like this. He would not make a meaningless struggle. If there was a chance of winning, he would take it down with irresistible force. Gong Jie's cards were very smooth. Hua Jin cooperated with him and killed all the way. Big plain. Gong Jie only had a single card left in his hand. At that moment, there were not many cards left in the farmer's hand. Gong Jie calculated that there were probably no guns left in the room. However, at this critical moment, Mu Yaja came out. Hua Jin saw that he had killed a Cheng Yaojin at this critical moment. He did not hesitate to contribute the bomb in his hand. 5 6s was a very big bomb. No one could blow it up. However, the tragedy was that Hua Jin was not in Gong Jie's house. He could not put down his card. His next house was Yu Yu. He played a single card to test the waters. There was no trump card left on the field. Yu Yu made Hua Jin fall into despair. Gong Jie only had one card in his hand. As long as he didn't play a single card, he was basically unstoppable. Soon, Yu Yu played a pair of 44-4s and placed Mu Yaja's cards on the table. Hua Jin received no more cards that could suppress him, and Gong Jie's cards were all alone. They posed no threat to him. Mu Yaja quickly threw out all the cards in his hand. The last card fluttered onto the table. Mu Yaja crossed his arms over his chest and arrogantly raised his chin. A sinister smile appeared on his face. It was as if he was silently brewing some perverted game. Gong Jie's face darkened and turned ashen. He looked at Mu Yaja, who was constantly sizing him up. His expression changed again and again. It was over. Fell into his hands. Gong Jie gritted his teeth and said angrily, "This man's gaze was perverted no matter how he looked at it." He did not know what tricks he was going to play. Hua Jin's eyes widened in shock. He did not expect this round to end like this. He had lost. The problem was that there was Gong Jie in his camp. The final punishment was destined to be a bloodbath. He had just done a set of push-ups. Fortunately, he had avoided a calamity. This time, would he be implicated in a perverted game like Gong Jie? In the end, his prophecy came true. Chapter 22:44. When Yu Yu heard this, she covered her mouth and snickered. Suddenly, she nudged Yun Shirshi's shoulder and asked softly, "Mommy, Daddy said we're going to play a game. Guess what kind of perverted game it will be?" Yun Shirshir shook her head blankly and said, "I can't guess, but it must be very perverted." Hua Jin accidentally overheard Yun Shirshir's words. Even though her voice was very low, he could hear it clearly because they were sitting opposite each other. Corporal punishment. He supported corporal punishment. Hua Jin would rather do push-ups than play this man's game. It must be very perverted, right? Sure enough, his guess was confirmed. Mu Yaja quickly announced the rules of the game, the tissue game. There were a total of 10 tissues. They were neither thin nor thick. First, Hua Jin had to suck them up with his mouth. Then, using the same mouth-to-mouth method, Gong Jie had to suck them up to his own mouth. Then, he would suck all the tissues and throw them into the trash can. Only then would it be considered a success. Wasn't this the same as a disguised mouth-to-mouth kiss? And it was 2 men. Gong Jie and Hua Jin looked at each other, both uncomfortable. Mu Yaja suddenly said casually, "Oh, if the tissues fall on the ground, there's a punishment too. However, if you use your mouth to suck the tissues up from the ground, then you can avoid the punishment. Do you understand the rules?" Dead silence. Gong Jie and Hua Jin's faces were extremely dark. Gong Jie's face was dark because he was extremely unhappy with the rules of the game. This was obviously teasing him. What tissue game? It was fine if it was only a woman, but the opponent was actually a man like Hua Jin. This was driving him crazy. Hua Jin's face was dark because he felt like he was the one who was implicated for no reason. It wasn't his first time kissing a man. Most importantly, he didn't dare to think about indirectly kissing a great demon king. What if he touched the big demon's red line and got swallowed whole? Yu Yu tried hard to hold back her laughter. Her shoulders were shaking as she tried to hold back her laughter. Tears were about to come out. Interesting. Uncle, come on. You said it just now too. Since you've lost, you have to accept the punishment. I've prepared the props for you too. Okay. Gong Jie glanced at the 10 tissues that Yu Yu had prepared for him. his lips for a while before he swallowed his anger, and said, "Okay." He glanced coldly at Wuxia and sneered through gritted teeth. "You win!" With that, he pushed Hua Jin to the side and ordered, "Begin." You, you, and you. To you, and you. The problem was that Gong Jie was taller than Hua Jin. Hence, Hua Jin had no choice but to stand on tiptoe. But the moment he lost his balance, he stumbled and nearly fell. But that wasn't the case. The tissue landed on the chair. Feeling depressed, the man rebuked, "Can't you be more careful?" Hua Jin muttered, "Who asked you to be so tall?" Gong Jie's face darkened. "Pick it up." Hua Jin's expression changed again. Then he bent down slowly and sucked the tissue into his mouth. Chapter 22:45. Gong Jie's broad palm held the back of the man's neck firmly as his thin lips pressed down on the ladders, sucking the tissue away with a suction force. Hua Jin was slightly taken aback by this gesture. Usually, this gesture was only used when a man was kissing a woman. Every detail showed the man's unique domineering and subtle gentleness. Just as he was stunned, Gong Jie had already moved closer to his lips. It was so cold. His lips were inexplicably cold. But Hua Jin's lips were very warm. The tissue was very thin, as if there was air between them. At the moment of contact, Hua Jin could almost clearly feel Gong Jie's soft and slightly cold lips. His breath blew against his face. In the blink of an eye, Gong Jie sucked the tissue away from his mouth. Hua Jin was slightly stunned. His eyes widened, and his fingertips involuntarily caressed the lips that were still slightly warm. His face and ears were red, and his heart was beating like thunder. At this moment, Gong Jie had already turned around and walked briskly towards the trash can. He aimed at the trash can and gently threw the tissue into it. He deliberately bent down, afraid that if the angle was too high, the tissue would float elsewhere. "The first one is a success." Yu cheered him on. "There are still 9 more. Uncle, you can do it." Gong Jie was speechless. Hua Jin was speechless. Both of their faces darkened, especially Hua Jin. He wanted to cry. What was this? He was innocent. Okay? Yun Shersher covered her face helplessly. She was speechless. "This game really hurts my eyes." You didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Only a black-bellied person like Daddy would come up with such a disgusting game. Little Munchkin's voice was very soft, but it was still heard by Wuxia. He flicked Little Munchkin's head and said unhappily, "Don't talk bad about Daddy." Wu. Gong Jie and the other two followed the same process and completed the game one by one. In fact, this game was not difficult at all. The main reason was that the two men were kissing mouth to mouth in disguise, so it was inevitable that they would feel awkward and uncomfortable. This was especially true for Gong Jie, a typical straight man. This was his first time kissing a man. Although there was a piece of tissue between them, the tissue was so thin that it was basically non-existent. Through the tissue, he could still feel the shape of her lips and breath. Therefore, when the game was over, the two of them returned to their seats with a sour expression. In particular, Gong Jie's face was ashen and gloomy. "Continue," Gong Jie said aggressively. When Yu saw this, she couldn't help but open her pink lips and exclaim, "Wow, Uncle is so cool. His morale is off the charts." "Humph, I want revenge," Gong Jie vowed solemnly. Then he shuffled and cut the cards. His movements were so swift that it was dazzling. It seemed that Uncle was starting to get serious. Yes, he had to be more careful. Otherwise, he would also become cannon fodder. In the third round, Gong Jie was the landlord again. Yu lamented, "Uncle, why do you keep getting the landlord? You're practically a professional landlord. We've only played 3 rounds and you're already in the second round. Do you think I want to get the landlord?" Gong Jie snorted in annoyance. He obviously despised this luck. Chapter 22:46. Yu continued, "It's not easy to play the landlord. I have a lot of bombs in my hand and 4 aces. Uncle, you're bound to lose." Gong Jie sneered, "You're bragging." Yu snorted and said, "Let's wait and see." Gong Jie was the first to play. It was a straight of 7 cards. However, Mu Yaja threw out an 8 in the next second and dominated the scene. He played the biggest card since it was a straight of the top. Unless it was a bomb, there was no other way. The moment Mu Yaja played his cards, he immediately ruled out the possibility of him being the landlord. Who would block their own family's cards? Hence, no one could stop Mu Yaja from playing his cards. However, just as his cards were about to run out, Yu's sharp eyes spotted a card in the pile of cards that Mu Yaja played, a 9 of spades. This was the landlord card that Gong Jie had called out. He was the first to discover it. The others also discovered it one after another. "Daddy, you're the landlord?" When Yun Shishir saw this card, she turned pale with fright. She had always thought that Mu Yaja was her teammate. Hence, when Mu Yaja played his cards, she did not have her guard up. In the end, she did not expect him to be the landlord. Gong Jie, on the other hand, was equally baffled and confused. "You're the secret landlord?" Mu Yaja admitted frankly and nodded. "Yeah." Gong Jie was immediately enraged. "Then why did you keep betting on my cards?" Mu Yaja casually said, "I just don't like you." Everyone was speechless. Gong Jie was once again confused. Yun Shishir did not say another word. This time, she could not let Mu Yaja play his cards. She immediately blew up and sealed it. This time, the landlord's side was out of ammunition and food. Mu Yaja's hand was very smooth. Originally, he only had 1 bomb in his hand, but this bomb had already been used to bet on Gong Jie's hand. The 2 bombs in Gong Jie's hands also blew up Mu Yaja. Now, he had no more cards to play. Yu had a lot of cards in his hand. Initially, he thought that Daddy was his teammate, so he had been going easy on him. However, when he found out about Daddy's identity, he immediately started throwing his cards. Gong Jie and Mu Yaja stared at each other helplessly. They had no more cards to play. Yun Shishir, Yu, and Hua Jin could be considered to have a tacit understanding of each other, so they won easily. Gong Jie threw down his cards and cried out gloomily, "This is an internal strife. He could have won. Brother-in-law, do you have any standpoint? Why are you betting on me when you have such good cards?" Mu Yaja said that famous phrase again, "I just don't like you." Gong Jie was furious. "You!" Yun Shishir immediately became the peacemaker and mediated. "Aya, no matter what, you've already lost. Both of you should accept your punishment obediently, right?" Yu clutched his stomach and laughed. Originally, he thought that Daddy was his teammate. This time, Uncle was going to lose again. He didn't expect the outcome to be reversed. Uncle had indeed lost, but Daddy had also lost. He laughed loudly. He was overjoyed. Gong Jie lost dejectedly. It was fine if he lost, but this time he felt very sullen. "How should we punish them?" Yu pursed his lips coldly. Gong Jie looked a little timid. This little guy was also a first-class black-bellied person. He didn't know what kind of rotten idea he would come up with this time. Hua Jin and Yun Shishir, on the other hand, were calm and composed. "How about this, Uncle? You and Daddy will interlock our fingers until the end of the next round." Gong Jie widened his eyes in shock. "Are you kidding?" Chapter 2247. Mu Yaja glared at him coldly. "Don't mess around. You must accept your loss. You must accept your loss. Hurry up and hold hands. Otherwise, if you don't do as I say, I'll think of something more fun. Okay?" This was considered a threat. At the thought of Yu's little head, who knew what terrible punishment she was thinking of, Gong Jie and Mu Yaja looked at each other in disdain. Then, they gritted their teeth and reached out to each other. However, just as their hands touched each other's fingertips, Mu Yaja retracted his hand in disgust and said coldly, "How disgusting. Holding hands with a man gave them goosebumps." Gong Jie's lips twitched. Then he said coldly, "Brother-in-law, you still have the cheek to say that? If you weren't a hindrance, would you need to be punished?" Mu Yaja sneered. "Who told you to pick me as your teammate?" Gong Jie replied angrily, "If I knew that the 9 of spades was in your hands, I wouldn't have picked you even if I died." You couldn't stand it anymore. She urged, "Hurry up. Don't waste time. Isn't it just holding hands?" What's so difficult about that? Wuxia and Gong Jie glared at him in unison. Their eyes were full of resentment. Change the punishment. Gong Jie demanded righteously. Yu glanced at him calmly. Then she agreed readily. Okay, then you can kiss. Gong Jie was speechless. Wuxia was speechless. Yun Shirshir covered her face. This guy was really two-faced. He actually made two men who didn't get along and were even incompatible like fire and water kiss each other. How cruel. What punishment could be worse than this? Gong Jie complained. Yu, are you trying to turn your daddy gay? Wuxia coldly snorted, expressing his stance. Yu said, with mommy around, daddy won't turn gay. Actually, I'm doing this because I hope that you can improve your relationship with each other and get along more harmoniously. Don't act like you're sworn enemies. Harmony my ass. Harmony my ass. Forget it. Let's just hold hands then. It was better than kissing. The two of them calmed down for a long time. After a long struggle in their minds, they slowly stretched out their hands and held each other tightly. Their fingers interlocked. On the surface, it looked calm and peaceful. But secretly, although the two of them were holding hands tightly, they were secretly competing with each other. Their grip strength was equal, and they were using all their skills to break each other's hands. However, the two of them appeared to be very calm on the surface, but in their hearts, they were cursing in unison. Bastard, you have a lot of strength. You win. Yu smiled satisfactorily. Looking at the two of them holding hands, she nodded and said, not bad. Uncle and Daddy's relationship seems to have improved a lot. Mommy, look. They're holding hands very tightly. Yun Shirshir glanced at them and broke out in a cold sweat. How was this a handshake? It was as if they were trying to break each other's hands by shaking hands. In the fourth round, Yu became the landlord in the open, while Hua Jin was the landlord in the dark. The interesting thing was that Wuxia and Gong Jie had to hold hands to finish this round because of the punishment from the previous round. It was especially difficult to play with one hand. It was easy to pick the cards, but it took a lot of effort to sort them out. Gong Jie even used his mouth. In the end, he was flustered and messed up the cards, causing them to fall face up on the table. Yu and Hua Jin immediately went over to take a peek. Chapter 2248. Yu said matter-of-factly, what do you mean by peeking? Uncle was the one who laid out the cards on the table for us to see. However, it had to be said that Wuxia was the most ruthless when it came to this. First, he held all the cards in his hand tightly. Then, he looked at the messy cards in his hand. After a few glances, he laid them out on the table one by one. Then, without even looking at them, he rearranged the cards according to the order that he had just memorized. Using his amazing memory, he rearranged the cards and quickly sorted them out. Yu and Yun Shirshir were stunned. Such an amazing memory? He memorized the order of the cards in just a few glances. Moreover, he sorted them out directly. Yu was perfect. He finally knew who he had inherited his high IQ from. Hua Jin was dumbfounded. Because of Wuxia's despicable game, he was hoping to see him make a fool of himself with this sentence. In the end, his astonishing memory was truly a show of strength. Although Yu and Hua Jin's cards weren't very good, Yun Shirshir and Wuxia both mistakenly thought that Gong Jie was the secret master. They started an internal conflict and bombarded him indiscriminately. Gong Jie felt wronged. It was already difficult to play the cards. Now that he had finally played the cards, they thought that he was the secret master. However, he couldn't defend himself at all. Gong Jie swallowed his anger and played with a knot in his heart. It wasn't until Hua Jin jumped out and confirmed his identity as the secret master that the truth was revealed. Gong Jie, who had been wronged, cried out, "Sis!" Yun Shirshir bit her lip regretfully and patted his shoulder lightly with guilt. "I'm sorry, Xiao Jie. I misunderstood you." Gong Jie said sadly, "Why did you all think that I was the secret master?" Wuxia said softly, "It's your fault for having a bad face." Gong Jie. At this time, Yu only had one pair of cards left in his hand. He looked around coldly. A few people were also staring at him, but they could only stare. There were no more cards that could stop him. Yu sneered and threw out the cards in his hand. Once again, he was the fisherman who reaped the benefits. He stood up and high-fived Hua Jin. Yeah, we won again. Then, Yu turned around in high spirits and said proudly to the other three people whose faces were ashen, as if their souls had left their bodies, I'm so awesome. Yun Shirshir, Gong Jie, Mu Yaja. At the end of the round, Mu Yaja and Gong Jie quickly shook off their hands and looked at each other with disdain. However, Yu said softly, Don't let go. Gong Jie asked, Didn't you say that we would hold hands until the end of the round? I did say that, but didn't you guys lose this round again? Yu laughed evilly and said, Then why don't you guys continue holding hands? Gong Jie and Mu Yaja were speechless again. They took a deep breath and felt as if they were about to vomit. Yun Shirshir pointed at herself and asked, Then what's my punishment? Yu smiled gently and winked at her. He hooked his finger at her and said, Mommy's punishment is to kiss me. What kind of punishment is this? It's obviously a reward for yourself, right? Hua Jin said softly. Yu said arrogantly, I don't accept any objections. Yun Shirshir laughed and leaned over to give him a loving peck on the cheek. She rubbed his little head. Chapter 2249. Unknowingly, the five of them fooled around until the end of the last round. It was already 4:50 a.m. However, even though it was already very late, it did not affect their mood at all. However, Yu was sleepy and wanted to sleep. Hence, Yun Shirshir carried him back to the room and coaxed him to sleep. Once the little devil fell asleep, the game naturally could not continue. As for the other big devil, he was still very energetic. Most of the three men present had multiple jobs and were working day and night, especially Gong Jie, who often flew around the world due to the international time difference, so he was not sleepy at all. As for Hua Jin, he was already used to staying up late to film. Hence, at this time, he did not feel very tired. Mu Yaja was even more so. Before this, he often worked overtime until 4 a.m. Hence, his biological clock was already used to such a late time. However, now that he had a family, his wife and children were waiting for him at home. Naturally, he would not arrange his work to be too late and would start working very early. The four of them sat at the table. Seeing that the game could not continue, Yun Shirshir brought over a tray of snacks and poured a cup of tea for each of them. Then, they sat down and chatted for a while. At 5 a.m., Yun Shirshir finally could not take it anymore. She yawned loudly and said that she was sleepy and wanted to go back to her room to rest. Hua Jin also wanted to go home, but Yun Shirshir said, It's already so late. Why don't you rest here? There's a guest room upstairs. Won't this disturb you? Hua Jin asked worriedly. Yun Shirshir was about to speak when a cold voice interrupted her. A cold voice sounded from the side. Yes. Yun Shirshir turned around in surprise and saw Mu Yaja looking at her with disdain. So hurry up and go home. Gong Jie immediately retorted on behalf of Hua Jin. Brother-in-law, you're not cute at all. Actually, you just can't accept it, right? Just now, when we were playing cards, Hua Jin's luck was too good and he beat you to a pulp. That's why you're upset. Humph. A sore loser. Mu Yaja said coldly, Shut your mouth. Gong Jie glared at him with hostility. Yun Shirshir hurriedly stepped forward and mediated. All right, stop quarreling. Xiao Jie, you two don't go back. Stay here tonight. When Gong Jie heard this, he pretended to be arrogant and said, I want to. But it seems that brother-in-law doesn't really welcome me. Mu Yaja immediately replied, Yeah, you're not welcome. Look. Yun Shirshir walked over angrily and pinched Mu Yaja's face with both hands. Humph. I'm warning you. You'd better be more polite to my Xiao Jie. Mu Yaja's handsome brows furrowed slightly. However, looking at the woman in front of him who was pouting coquettishly, he only smiled dotingly. He held her hand nonchalantly and pecked her fingertips. All right, I won't say anything else. That's a good boy. Yun Shirshir smiled happily and reached out to pat his head gently. Then, she led Hua Jin and Gong Jie up to the second floor while chatting cheerfully. There were 3 guest rooms, a living room, a study, and a private bathroom on the second floor. After settling them down, Yun Shirshir took 2 cartons of milk and returned to her room. Chapter 2250. The showerhead splashed water. Mu Yaja stood under the showerhead and allowed the water droplets to fall on his body. He watched as the clear droplets slid down his well-defined and defined skin. It had to be said that his body was comparable to an international model. The inverted triangular figure, the standard golden ratio, and the well-defined mermaid line, all of them were full of hormones. Especially his waist, his 8-pack abs were firm and powerful. His body was very firm, but this kind of firmness was definitely not like those muscular men who looked shiny and oily. He was not thick, but his perfect muscles gave people a great visual impact. It was only when it came to him that Yun Shirshir deeply felt what a real visual feast was. Yun Shirshir bit her lip and said in a daze, "Hubby, you're so sexy." Mu Yaja looked back and stared at her for a while. Suddenly, he laughed and said, "My wife, why are you having a nosebleed?" "Nosebleed?" Yun Shirshir was shocked. She didn't have time to think carefully about the playfulness and teasing in his words. She subconsciously reached out her hand to wipe her nose. However, after wiping again and again, she didn't manage to wipe the blood. A certain silly woman then realized that she had been tricked. She immediately raised her head in displeasure and glared at him. "Why do you like to tease people so much?" Mu Yaja smiled mischievously. Then, he hooked his finger at her and said in a deep voice, "Come here." His voice was very low, and his extremely magnetic voice resonated in the shower room with a kind of bewitching resonance. Yun Shirshir seemed to have been bewitched. She walked over as if possessed. When she was close enough, she sized him up. "What?" Mu Yaja suddenly reached out an arm from the shower cubicle, grabbed her hand tightly, and pulled her into the shower cubicle. Before Yun Shirshir could react, she was drenched by the showerhead. She only felt the world spinning. When she came back to her senses, she was already pressed against the wall by a certain vile man. Mu Yaja's naked body covered her like a mountain. Her petite body was controlled by him in this narrow space with nowhere to run. The milk carton fell to the ground with a thud. The milky white milk dripped along the floor and flowed down the drain. "You?" Yun Shirshir looked at him in surprise. Her gaze then fell on his chest, which was so sexy that it was almost suffocating. She involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air and stammered, My clothes are all wet." Sigh. "It's okay." The man lowered his eyes and lowered his wet eyelashes. The two of them snuggled intimately together. Yun Shirshir only had to look up to see the crystal-clear water droplets on his long eyelashes as they slowly dripped down the ends of his eyelashes. Mu Yaja reached out to unbutton her shirt. Yun Shirshir shyly grabbed his large hand and said hesitantly, "Xiao Jie and Hua Jin are still upstairs. Don't be like this." Mu Yaja said disapprovingly. "The soundproofing of this house is very good. You don't have to worry about that." Yun Shirshir was still stammering. Her face was so red that it looked like blood was about to drip out. It was obvious that his initiative made her a little shy. Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. He couldn't help but tease. Shy. Chapter 2251. The man pecked her lips lightly. His gentle breath and the warm water gave her a great thrill. "We're already an old married couple. What's there to be shy about?" Unexpectedly, this sentence made Yun Shirshir blush even more. She couldn't be any more embarrassed. "Old married couple," she muttered unhappily. "Who's an old married couple with you?" The wedding hadn't even been held yet. They could only be considered newlyweds. In the end, this man had jumped to the old married couple mode. However, Mu Yaja ignored her small mutterings. Like an evil demon king, he gently and patiently enticed her. "Don't tell me you don't want me? His voice was so low and bewitching that Yun Shirshir bit her lip, but she didn't dare to act rashly. Their bodies were so close together that she quickly felt the subtle changes in his body. Sensing this change, she was shocked again. She stared at him with her eyes wide open, not knowing what to do. "Look," Mu Yaja said. "It's already in high spirits because of you." Yun Shirshir felt wronged. She quibbled, "I didn't do anything." However, Mu Yaja said, "Little thing, you didn't do anything. but you're already damned tempting. He suddenly hugged her, his large palm holding her little hand gently. Then he said bewitchingly, "Touch, touch." Yoon Shirshir's eyes widened instantly. Like a frightened rabbit, she looked helpless and didn't know where to place her hands. Touch, touch there? She had never touched there with her hands before. Actually, she was very curious deep down. She didn't know how it felt to touch that place, but she felt that such an action was a little obscene and lascivious. Being restrained by such thoughts, she didn't dare to overstep this step. "You don't dare." Seeing how shy she was, Wuxia couldn't help but smile. Then, he grabbed her hand and slowly explored that unknown and mysterious place. Once his fingertips touched that scalding heat, Yoon Shirshir screamed and tried to withdraw her hand, but he held it firmly. "What happened?" So hot." Yoon Shirshir blushed as she described, "It feels so hot that I can't hold it." "Idiot," Wuxia complained. Just as he was about to continue, Yoon Shirshir stopped him and said, "Don't move. I can do it myself." Wuxia let go of her hand. Yoon Shirshir continued this action that made people blush and their hearts race. Her hands were very small and very white, but they were as smooth as jade and as fine as silk. Some people's hands were naturally beautiful, and her hands were one of them. They were as beautiful as a piece of art. Because of her touch, he was extremely aroused. Very quickly, a numbing current flashed across his waist. In his impulse, he couldn't wait to take her directly. However, he was worried that this would scare her. Hence, he had to grit his teeth and restrain himself as he waited for her next move. At this time, she was already sweating profusely, and the clothes on her body were all wet from the shower. She could no longer tell whether the wet patch on her back was sweat or hot water from the shower. Chapter 2252. The domineering and mesmerizing kiss was like a mellow wine, intoxicating her to the point where her head felt light and her feet felt light. The man in front of her was handsome and languid, exuding a bewitching aura from head to toe. He was simply irresistibly charming. She hated herself for being so disappointing, and her throat moved a little. This subtle movement was noticed by him, and a playful smile appeared on his face. Yoon Shirshir lowered her eyes and blinked shyly. The man murmured lazily as he breathed into her ear. She complained, "You eat so much usually, but I don't see you gaining any weight." The man's low and magnetic voice rang in her ear. "Idiot. This is my physique." His hot breath brushed against her ear. Just like that, he patiently guided her slowly. Even though it was a little reckless, at least she understood the gist of it. She raised her head and glared at him, feeling a little annoyed. Yoon Shirshir's eyelids twitched for a while. Her mind was in a mess, so much so that her movements lost their rhythm and became hurried. She bit her lip in embarrassment. The more she thought about it, the more embarrassed she felt. So much so that she was not paying attention. SSSS. The man suddenly grabbed her hand tightly. "Shirshir? What's wrong?" The man tugged on her earlobe and deliberately hurt her. He chided in dissatisfaction. "You're so clumsy." "Humph. I'll cripple you if you continue to talk nonsense." "You dare? Do you think I dare?" "Ha! You dare to do that? So what? Who's afraid of who?" The man could not help but smile as a playful look flashed past his eyes. He suddenly grabbed her chin and kissed her. Pressing his lips against hers, he said casually, "Stubborn little idiot." He was no longer passive and took the initiative to attack. Wuxia pulled her shoulders and turned her back to him, aggressively occupying her from behind. Her body trembled, and the coquettish blush on her face flew all the way to the tip of her ears. This look was simply too adorable. The smile in his eyes deepened. After it was over, Wuxia carried her to the bed, covered her with a blanket, and held her in his arms. However, the hands of the woman in his arms were restlessly climbing up and down his body. Wuxia grabbed her hand unhappily and asked sternly, "What are you doing?" Yoon Shirshir plucked up her courage and said, "I just want to try how your abs feel." Wuxia's face turned green. "Can't I just touch it?" Yoon Shirshir's curiosity was overflowing. She acted coquettishly and kissed him to please him. Just satisfy my curiosity. No. The man refused mercilessly. Yoon Shirshir pouted and complained, You're so heartless. Why did you let me touch you when you were feeling comfortable? Why are you not letting me touch you now? Stingy. Humph. Muyaja ignored her and held her hand firmly, refusing to let her have her way. Since he refused to let her, her rebellious heart rose and she reached out to touch him. However, the moment she reached out, the man turned around and avoided her touch, unwilling to let her touch him. Yoon Shirshir began to attack him without restraint. She pushed and punched him, and the two of them started to mess around under the blanket, pushing and shoving each other. Chapter 22:53. But the moment she stretched out her hand, the man turned around and avoided her touch, unwilling to let her touch him. Yoon Shirshir started to attack him without restraint, pushing and punching him. The two of them started to mess around under the blanket, pushing and shoving each other. In the end, the two of them were sweating profusely, but Yoon Shirshir was still unwilling to give up. It was as if she would not give up until she achieved her goal. She continued to move her hands all over him, insisting on experiencing that feeling. The man suddenly flipped over and pinned her under him. He said, I'll let you touch me, but you'll have to bear the consequences. Yoon Shirshir burst out laughing when she heard that and retorted in exasperation. What consequences can there be? It's not like you'll break it. Humph. Humph. Since you think so. As the man said this, he grabbed her little hand and moved it downwards. Yoon Shirshir finally got what she wanted. However, once she achieved her goal, her heart started to beat even faster. Thump, thump, thump. Coincidentally, the man pinned her under his body. The sonorous and powerful heartbeat in his chest echoed in her ears. She had only touched him lightly with a smile, but very quickly, it was as hot as steel again. Yoon Shirshir's mind was filled with question marks. What's going on? She didn't do anything. All she did was touch him. How did he return to this state? Was there ever a time when this man was exhausted? The man pretended to be innocent as he defended himself. Idiot. You have to take responsibility. I didn't do anything. Yoon Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're so energetic. Mu Yaja gave her little tender lips a peck in amusement and said righteously, That's because I've met something I like. That's why I have so much energy. Yoon Shirshir smiled and pushed his shoulder. All right, let's go down. I'm not playing anymore. Let's go to sleep. You want to sleep just like that? Mu Yaja harumphed coldly, but how could he let her off so easily? It had finally calmed down, and now it had returned to such a state. Shouldn't she be responsible for it? Before the woman could protest, her weak voice of resistance was quickly swallowed by the man's passionate kiss. It was an enchanting night until dawn. On the first day of the new year, Gong Jie woke up in the afternoon. He walked around downstairs and realized that Xiaoyichen had also woken up early. Xiaoyichen went to bed early, so he woke up early. Since he was awake, Yu naturally got up as well. After Yu got dressed and washed up, she walked into the living room and saw Gong Jie and Xiaoyichen sitting in front of the TV, playing games together. Yu loved to play video games, so he bought a lot of gaming equipment at home. He bought an Xbox 360 and iWii, a PS4, and a large pack of game discs. Xiaoyichen loved to play video games as well, so when he had nothing to do, he liked to sit in front of the TV and play games. The two of them were playing games in full swing. In the dining room, Yu yawned repeatedly as she cooked lunch. After the dishes were served, Gong Jie and Xiaoyichen walked over. Coincidentally, Hua Jin had also woken up and was walking down the stairs. Brother Hua Jin, come down and eat. Brother Hua Jin. A trace of warmth slid down his heart. Hua Jin couldn't help but smile as he sat down at the dining table. Yu distributed the bowls and chopsticks. Gong Jie suddenly asked, Where's your mommy? It's time to wake her up and eat. Chapter 22:54. Oh, they're probably still sleeping. Let's not disturb them. It's already midnight. It's time for them to wake up. As Gong Jie spoke, he coaxed Xiaoyichen and said, You're in charge of waking them up. No way. You scooped a bowl of rice for him and said seriously, they probably slept very late last night, so they shouldn't be awake at this time. Let them sleep a little longer. When they wake up, they can take care of their own lunch. Gong Jie couldn't help but be suspicious. He asked curiously, how do you know that they slept very late? Yu held his chopsticks in his mouth and smiled elegantly. Uncle, you're single. You shouldn't ask so casually. If you don't ask, you won't get hurt. The table of single people understood instantly. Hua Jin held his stomach and laughed. Ha ha ha. This Yu didn't sound like a 7-year-old child at all when he spoke. Instead, he sounded like a mature man. It was so funny. Gong Jie flicked his forehead and said angrily, what are you laughing at? Hua Jin laughed and said, I didn't expect you to be single too. Yu smiled and said, Uncle, you're single. Brother Hua Jin is also single. Why don't you two hold hands and get together? Gong Jie said rudely, get lost. Hua Jin's face turned pale, but it quickly turned red and he said, I'm straight. I like women. But I saw you two playing the paper towel game last night. You two had great chemistry. Come to think of it, you two have kissed 10 times. At this point, Yu suddenly leaned forward and looked at Gong Jie. He teased. How was it? When you two kissed, did you feel like you were electrocuted? Xiao Chen was confused as he listened. He slept very early last night, so he didn't participate in the mahjong game last night. Naturally, he didn't know about those exciting things. Get lost. Gong Jie's face darkened. This isn't considered kissing. Yu obviously wanted to stir up trouble. Uncle, you're so handsome and rich. Why can't you find a girlfriend? Is it because there's something wrong with your sexual orientation? Scram. Don't tell me you like pretty boys? Scram. How about I betroth brother Hua Jin to you? Scram. Speaking of this, Gong Jie was filled with anger. He had touched a sore spot. What an annoying brat. Xiao Chen was about to go crazy. His curiosity was overflowing. What are you guys talking about? After I fell asleep yesterday, did you guys fool around behind my back? Gong Jie was in a bad mood. Xiao Chen was chattering at the side. He looked up at the little guy and snorted coldly. He urged him, eat your food. Xiao Chen whimpered and pouted. He buried his face in grievance and focused on eating. He felt wronged, but he didn't say anything. Yu was amused by Xiao Chen's bitter expression. He covered his mouth and snickered. He explained, last night, the 5 of us were playing mahjong. Uncle lost, so Daddy punished him by playing a paper towel game with Brother Hua Jin. A paper towel game? Yup. Brother Hua Jin was responsible for sucking the paper towel into his mouth. Then, Uncle had to suck the paper towel from his mouth and throw it into the trash can, and so on. He had to do this 10 times to complete his punishment. Chapter 2255. Coincidentally, Gong Jie was sitting opposite him. The rice that Xiao Chen spat out landed directly on Gong Jie's face. Suppressing his anger, he closed his eyes and clenched his fists tightly. It was not until he repeatedly brewed his anger that he finally managed to calm down. When he opened his eyes, he was gritting his teeth. Do you have a death wish? Xiao Chen immediately panicked and explained, No, uncle, I didn't mean to mock you. It would have been better if he didn't try to hide it. Gong Jie's face darkened when he heard the explanation. You're obviously mocking me. Yu suddenly took out his cell phone, played the video, and showed it to Xiao Chen. You went to bed early last night, so you missed a lot. However, I took a video. Here, I'll show it to you. Gong Jie turned pale with fright when he saw this. He exclaimed in disbelief, You actually took a video? Yu said matter-of-factly, It would be a pity if I didn't take a video of such an exciting segment. Xiao Chen took the cell phone and watched it with great interest. When he saw Gong Jie sucking the tissue from Hua Jin's mouth with an ashen face, he laughed out loud. Ayaya, Uncle's expression is so interesting. Ha ha ha. Shut up. Gong Jie reached out to grab the cell phone. However, Xiao Chen was not inferior in terms of agility. He dodged nimbly and jumped down from the chair. He held the cell phone and hid in a corner where Gong Jie couldn't reach him. You're still watching. Gong Jie pushed his chair away and stood up to chase after him. Xiao Yichen turned around and made a face at him provocatively. Then he ran up to the second floor. Gong Jie followed him to the second floor. Knock, knock, knock. Yu and Hua Jin looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders in tacit understanding. In the end, little Yichen was caught by Gong Jie, who snatched the phone away from him. He swiftly deleted the video and then taught the little guy a lesson. When Gong Jie carried Xiao Yichen downstairs, the meat on the table had already been eaten. Where's the meat? On the sofa. Hua Jin and Yu hugged their round bellies and licked their lips. It's all in our stomachs. Gong Jie was speechless. That move just now couldn't have been to lure the tiger away from the mountain, right? Yu reprimanded them righteously. Who asked you to be so restless? Eat your food properly. Don't blame us if you can't get the meat. Feeling angry and aggrieved, little Yichen complained. Yu, you're too much. You did this on purpose. As they spoke, the two little guys started to mess around. Gong Jie watched in silence. All of a sudden, he smiled knowingly. These two little nephews were really two little elves. They were both cute and mischievous. He was a little envious but also had an inexplicable yearning. It was probably a very blissful thing to be able to have such a peaceful life. The two kids messed around and made a lot of noise. It unexpectedly aroused his desire for a family. Since he was young, his concept of family was very cold and vague. To him, the Gong family was more like a huge royal family than a simple and ordinary family. All the family members had their own missions. Even when he was young, he couldn't mess around like this without any scruples. In the face of huge benefits, every family member was eyeing covetously. Therefore, Gong Jie had always been vague about the concept of family. He only thought that family was just a place to stay. Chapter 22:56. If his father knew that he had two adorable grandsons, he would be overjoyed, right? At this thought, Gong Jie's expression froze. However, would there be a day when they could reunite? On the one hand, he hoped that his father would know that he had two adorable grandsons. On the other hand, from Yun Shirshir's perspective, he hoped that his father would never know. This way, he would not disturb their peaceful life. The feud between the Gongs and Mews was not something that could be explained in a few words. The hatred between the Gongs and the Mews was unfathomable. If his father knew that he would never allow his sister to be with Muyaja, he would definitely interfere. His sister would be heartbroken, though. Through this period of understanding, Gong Jie knew that his sister loved that man deeply. Hence, for the sake of his sister's happiness, he would never do anything that would make her sad. No matter what kind of feud existed between the two families, it had nothing to do with Muyaja. Although he hated the Mews, he could not bear to be ruthless toward the man who could give his sister happiness. This was probably what it meant to love the house and its crow. For his sister's sake, he could choose to tolerate Muyaja in all aspects. However, at the same time, he could not confess this matter to his father. He was worried that his father would not be able to accept it. Yes, his father and mother's love was also destroyed by that executioner, Mu Sheng. A car accident separated heaven and earth forever. Love, hate, anger, and infatuation. He did not wish for his father to become the second Mu Sheng. Hence, he would keep this matter a secret for as long as possible. Even if it was a little difficult for him to be sandwiched between his father and sister, he had no other choice now. Smack! Just as Gong Jie was deep in thought, a pillow flew directly at his face. He caught it and saw the two children playing around on the sofa, each hugging a pillow and hitting each other. Wah wah wah! Save me! I'm going to die. Under Yu's attack, Xiao Yichen quickly lost the upper hand. Gong Jie's face darkened as he thought to himself, "Idiot! You two brats! Stop messing around! Uncle, you bullied me. Uncle, teach this fellow a lesson for me." Humph! Just as the three of them were fooling around, the phone rang. Everyone fell silent. Yu followed the sound and found the phone on the sofa. Surprised, she asked, "Whose phone is this?" When Hua Jin saw this, he raised his hand and said, "Mine." "Yes." Someone is calling you. Yu handed her the phone. Hua Jin took the phone and glanced at the number displayed on the screen. His face immediately turned cold. Under everyone's strange gazes, he hurriedly walked to the balcony and picked up the phone. Littleya? Jean! Lin Shuia's willful and coquettish cries came from the other end of the line. There was a hint of helplessness and uneasiness in her voice, but more than that, it sounded soft and coquettish. She sobbed, "Where are you?" "I'm at home." Hua Jin did not think too much about it and lied that he was at home. However, as soon as he said that, he felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. On the other end, Lin Shuia stood in Hua Jin's apartment. Looking around, a trace of cold disappointment appeared on her exquisitely made-up face. "Is that so? Then why don't I see you?" Chapter 2257. Was she in the apartment? Today was not the first day of the Lunar New Year. Why would she come out to look for him at this time? Hua Jin walked over to the clothes rack, picked up his coat, and put it on. Lin Shuia's intermittent cries could be heard from the other end of the line. She sounded weak and helpless. Compared to her usual haughtiness, she now looked like a helpless little bird. "I'll give you half an hour. Come to my side immediately. Jean, I need you." Now, Lin Shuia ended the fairy tale with an almost commanding tone. Hua Jin held the cell phone in a daze for a while. Then he smiled bitterly and turned around. "Yu Shaoichen, I have something to do now. I need to rush back immediately. When Shishir and Chairman Mu wake up, please pass on my wishes for a happy new year to them." "Brother Hua Jin, where are you going?" Yu asked suspiciously. Hua Jin pondered for a moment and smiled helplessly. "I have something important to do. I have to leave immediately." "I'm sorry. It's okay. If it's urgent, then go quickly. We'll pass on your New Year's greetings for you." "Oh, right." Hua Jin took out 2 red packets from the pocket of his shirt and gave one to each of them. "This is a red packet I prepared for both of you. It's a little token of my appreciation." "Thank you, Brother Hua Jin." Xiaoi Chen and Yu were beaming with joy. Hua Jin bent down and kissed the 2 little fellows on their foreheads. Then he turned around and left in a hurry. When Hua Jin returned to the apartment, he stood at the door and saw a pair of high heels sitting quietly on the shoe cabinet outside. She was here. His heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Her arrival did not bring him a trace of joy. Instead, it made his originally joyous mood even heavier. He did not like Lin Shuia at all. In fact, he hated her. Being together with her was more like a way to make do with each other. Having debuted in the entertainment industry for so many years, he had won many dazzling awards with his outstanding acting skills. Many people said that he was born to be an actor. He had a face that was more beautiful and charming than a woman's. It was definitely a gift from the heavens. What made people even more jealous was that he was obviously not an actor, but he was blessed by the heavens. His natural acting skills were praised by many veteran actors. That's right. His acting skills had reached the pinnacle of perfection. It was as if he was born with it. Therefore, in front of her, he was able to show his love and infatuation for her even though he was clearly disgusted with her. When he was with her, he put on a show, as if he was wearing a mask all the time. This was also a form of torture. The apartment was unlocked with his fingerprint. He opened the door and walked in. He found that all the lights were on and the curtains were tightly closed. Hua Jin had only just stepped through the door, but he felt his heart sink for no reason. In this way, where was the end? Usually, he would accept scripts and act. No matter what, he would leave the cast and crew after 1 or 2 years. But when would the script with Lin Shuia end? The apartment had 1 bedroom and 1 living room. It was more than 60 square meters, but it gave him a cold feeling. It was as if he was on a desolate island. Hua Jin placed his phone on the table and walked into the living room. There was no one there. He pushed open the bedroom door, but she was not there. Xiaoya. Chapter 2258. Was he already gone? Impossible. Hua Jin suddenly thought of something and walked to the bathroom door. Through the closed door, he could clearly hear the sound of water splashing from the bathroom. His heart skipped a beat and he pushed the door open. A gust of warm steam hit him in the face. Hua Jin's eyes widened. His gaze pierced through the mist and caught sight of a figure sitting in the huge bathtub. The heater in the bathroom was turned on and the difference in temperature was like heaven and earth. Hua Jin walked in and closed the bathroom door. He walked slowly to the side of the bathtub and squatted down gently. He saw Lin Shuya hugging her knees and sitting in the bathtub. She had not taken off her clothes. She sat in the bathtub with her clothes on and allowed the showerhead to soak her. She buried her face in the crook of her arms. Her lonely figure seemed to have a lot on her mind. Even when Hua Jin called her softly many times, she did not respond. "Xiaoya, what's wrong?" Hua Jin asked gently. He had never been so patient in front of ordinary people. He asked over and over again without getting tired of it. It was only then that Lin Shuya lifted her head. However, her eyes were red and bloodshot. The water on her face was dripping wet. For a moment, it was hard to tell whether it was water droplets or tears on her face. "What's wrong?" Hua Jin saw this and frowned slightly. He could not figure out why she was so despondent. "Jin." Lin Shuya suddenly turned around and hugged his shoulders. She mumbled helplessly, "Let's go far away together, okay? Just the two of us. Leave this place and never come back." Hua Jin frowned and was stunned for a moment. He held her shoulders and met her helpless and lost eyes. He could not help but laugh. "Why are you suddenly saying this? My father talked to me last night. He said that he would arrange a marriage between me and the Mu family." Before New Year's Eve, Mu Linfeng found an opportunity to meet Lin Shuya's father, Lin Buxiong. The Lin family was a prominent family in the capital. Perhaps the Lin family could not be compared to the Mu family and the Gu family. However, as one of the four famous families, the Lin family was not only a scholarly family, but Lin Shuya's grandfather was also one of the 10 founding fathers of the country. Even though he had retired many years ago, he still held great power. Could be said that the Lin family's background was influential in the capital. Lin Shuya's grandfather was an upright person. Therefore, even though he was not in power and did not speak, he still had a certain amount of prestige. Lin Shuya's father was in politics while her mother was in business. Qin Zhou once used these words to describe the Lin family. The Lin family is not comparable to the Song family. Even if the threshold of the Lin family was leveled, they would still be one level higher than the Song family. Although Old Master Lin and Old Master Song were both founding fathers of the nation, the power of the two families could not be compared in the same breath. While Song Enya's father was only a minister, Lin Shuya's father now held an important position with military power in his hands. If it were the Qing dynasty, he would be equivalent to the commander of the 9 gates. His influence was something that the Song family could not compare to. In other words, if the central government wants to deploy troops, they have to abide by the Lin's wishes. Chapter 2259. Mu Linfeng and Lin Buxiong chatted happily. Since both of them held important positions in the Jun district, their conversation naturally went smoothly. Mu Yanqing was present that day as well. Under Mu Linfeng's repeated reminders, Mu Yanqing performed well. In front of Lin Buxiong, he was courteous, humble, and elegant. In the face of such a situation, he did not show the slightest bit of stage fright. Lin Buxiong was quite satisfied with him. Previously, news of Mu Yaja's resignation as the head of the family had naturally reached the Lin family and his ears. Lin Buxiong appeared calm on the surface, but deep down, he knew very well that Mu Linfeng wanted to support Mu Yanqing to become the head of the Mu family. At the mention of Mu Yaja, Lin Buxiong sighed again and again, feeling that it was a pity. If it were Mu Yaja sitting next to Mu Linfeng that day, he would have slapped the table and agreed without hesitation. Lin Buxiong had met Mu Yaja a few times, and they had also met a few times. His impression of the man was that he was a rather outstanding young talent. Despite his young age, he was brimming with talent. Having been in the business world for many years, he was ruthless and had a unique eye for talent. He was able to bring the Mu group, which had been in decline, back to its peak. If such an outstanding man were to marry his precious daughter, Lin Buxiong would naturally be overjoyed. Then again, Even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. When Lin Buxiong learned that Mu Yaja had given up his position as the head of the family for a commoner girl, he could not help but sigh, but he also admired the latter's courage and extraordinary sense of responsibility. Mu Yanqing was young and handsome, but compared to Mu Yaja he was nothing. Therefore, Lin Buxiong did not agree on the spot. He only said that after the festival, he would arrange for the two children to meet and have a meal together so that they could get to know each other better. If they felt that they were compatible, the marriage could be settled as soon as possible. Mu Linfeng and Lin Buxiong were two sly old foxes with their own agendas. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was bent on boosting Mu Yanqing's power through this marriage alliance, so that he could ascend to the position of the family head in one fell swoop. If he married Lin Shuya, he could rely on the Lin family's influence to secure his position as the family head in the future. What about Lin Buxiong? His heart was heavy with worry. Lin Shuya was his most treasured daughter. At the same time, she was also the most troublesome child. Perhaps it was because she had been pampered too much since she was young that everything went according to her wishes. This kind of pampering had gradually evolved into spoiling. Immersed in such a doting environment, Lin Shuya's character became arrogant and willful. She did things her own way and was unreasonable to the point of being willful. Although she was willful and a little spoiled, it was fine. However, he had not taught his daughter well. He had to admit that. Lin Buxiong thought to himself, "Anyway, when the time comes, my daughter will eventually be married off. I'll find her a gentle husband who will pamper her and love her. When she has children in the future, she will naturally grow up and become sensible." That was what Lin Buxiong thought, so he just let her be. Little did he know that the more he let her do as she pleased, the more out of control she became. His daughter was actually fooling around with an actor outside. The Lin family adhered to tradition. After all, they came from a scholarly family. Regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl, they paid great attention to etiquette and self-restraint. Chapter 2260. When Lin Buxiong found out that his most beloved daughter was secretly keeping a gigolo in the entertainment industry, he was furious. He had secretly done a background check on this little lover. When he got his hands on the information, he glanced through it and found that it was full of misdeeds. One could only imagine how furious Lin Buxiong was at that time. He had always had high expectations for Lin Shuya and had always raised her like a well-bred young lady. However, he did not expect her to fool around behind his back. In a fit of anger, Lin Buxiong sent a few men to find Hua Jin and warned him to stay away from his daughter. Of course, Hua Jin was more than happy to do so and agreed repeatedly. However, when Lin Shuya found out, she went home and raged with Lin Buxiong. Her words made it clear that it was impossible for her to cut all ties with Hua Jin. Even if he wanted to arrange a marriage for her, she would gladly accept it. However, there was a condition. Her future husband must not interfere with her private matters with Hua Jin. How preposterous were these words! A married woman was still entangled with other men outside. If it was any other husband's family, they would not be able to tolerate it. Although there were many women who married into rich families, they did not have any feelings for their husbands. In the end, they went their separate ways and did not ask about each other. However, Lin Shuya was different. Lin Shuya was born in the Lin family. If she were to stir up the foul atmosphere, the Lin family's reputation would be ruined. Of course, Lin Buxiong would not agree and scolded Lin Shuya badly. Lin Shuya was used to doing things her own way. Why would she listen to him? She insisted and said that Hua Jin was her bottom line. If this bottom line was not violated, everything could be discussed. However, if it was violated, she would not let it go. Because of this, he flew into a rage and repeatedly asked Lin Shuya to cut off all ties with Hua Jin. Not only did Lin Shuya not listen to him and cut off all ties with this gigolo, the situation became worse. The originally harmonious relationship between the father and daughter gradually became like walking on thin ice. Lin Buxiong gradually lost confidence in his daughter. Originally, he wasn't worried about her marriage, but now he couldn't wait for this unfilial daughter to get married. Firstly, he hoped that this daughter of his would change her mind. At the very least, if she could have a child after getting married, She should not be entangled with that man for the sake of the child. Hence, Lin Buxiong had no objections when Mu Linfeng invited him to discuss this matter. Marrying into the Mu family was a good choice. Even though he did not particularly approve or like Mu Yanqing, if he could subdue his daughter, he would approve of this marriage. However, when it came to marriage, Lin Buxiong was quite open-minded. He didn't have the final say. He wanted to bring his daughter to meet each other. If they had a good impression of each other, they might as well try to date each other and arrange a marriage. Mu Linfeng agreed and arranged for the two children to meet after the Lantern Festival. When they got home, Lin Buxiong told Lin Shuya about it. Lin Shuya's face immediately darkened, and she immediately refused. However, on this point, Lin Buxiong's attitude was quite unyielding and did not allow for refusal. No matter what you think, it's not up to you to decide on this matter. I'm only telling you this so that you can be mentally prepared. Whether you want to go or not, you have to go this time even if you don't want to. Chapter 2261. After a pause, Lin Buxiong continued, Also, I'm warning you. Don't you dare play any tricks. I won't fall for it. When you're on the stage, you have to show me all the good manners that I've taught you. You should know what to do in your heart. If you don't do as I say, I have ways to make you regret it. Lin Shuya could hear the undisguised threat in her father's words. She raised her head abruptly, only to see her father's gaze, which was different from his usual calmness. Instead, it was filled with a bloodthirsty viciousness. She knew that her father was truly enraged and might even resort to some means to make a living. She immediately thought of Hua Jin and cried out, What are you going to do to Hua Jin? He deliberately tried to lure you into a trap. For a man like him, breaking his legs would be considered going easy on him. I think you've been bewitched by him and have fallen head over heels for him. I think that kid's face is especially good-looking. I'd like to see if you'll still be distracted by him if I cut his face and he doesn't have that kind of appearance anymore. Lin Buxiong snorted coldly, his tone scornful and cruel. Lin Shuya immediately screamed in fear. You can't treat him like this. Dad, don't force me. Okay? I don't want to get married. I don't want to marry anyone else. I just want to stay by Hua Jin's side. I love him. I want to be with him forever and never be separated. Why can't you fulfill my wish? Because people are never equal from the moment they're born. Lin Buxiong said coldly. People are never equal from the moment they're born. Lin Shuya was born noble while Hua Jin was as lowly as a speck of dust. These two people could only exist in parallel worlds and could never cross paths with each other. However, the only reason Lin Shuya and Hua Jin had a temporary intersection was because she appeared when Hua Jin was at his lowest. Lin Buxiong patiently persuaded her. Xiaoya, Dad really doesn't understand you. I really don't understand you. Tell me, why don't you fight for the position of young madam instead of getting entangled with a poor actor? There's no future between the two of you at all. Don't you know how many people have toyed with this kid that you've always doted on before he debuted? He's just a lowly figure with no dignity to speak of. You'll only sully your reputation if you get together with him. Could it be that you really haven't investigated this kid's past? In the words of the ancient times, this brat was a small prostitute in the ancient times. He was specially used for those influential people to play with. He was born to be a plaything. You'll only be humiliated if you get together with him. How can such a lowly person like him? If this were to spread out, wouldn't it make you and the Lin family a laughingstock? Your grandfather has sacrificed so much for the Lin family. The Lin family's reputation today can't be reduced to ashes because of a single mistake from you. Lin Shuya's face turned pale. That's enough. Lin Shuya clenched his fists. How was she not aware of Hua Jin? Chapter 2262. Later on, she used her influence to bring Hua Jin away from those foul places. But she didn't care about his past. In her eyes, Hua Jin was still pure and beautiful. She didn't know whether her feelings for him were out of pity or admiration. But these feelings were now deeply rooted and unshakable. What's wrong with loving someone? She loved a man deeply. Even if this man was as insignificant as a speck of dust, she could still put down her pride and sink into the dust with him. She knew very well that Hua Jin did not have her in his heart. He was merely putting on an act to please her and make her happy. She knew very well that the tenderness he had shown was nothing but an illusion. Those words of love were all against his heart. But she didn't care, because she loved him. Her love for him was enough. As long as she could be with him, it didn't matter even if it was just an act. Lin Buxiong saw that she was still stubborn and said angrily, "I will never allow you to tarnish the Lin family's reputation." Hearing this, Lin Shuya fell silent. After a long while, she suddenly asked faintly, "Dad, you don't agree with me being with Hua Jin because you're afraid that I'll tarnish the Lin family's reputation, right? Since that's the case, why don't you just kick me out of the family? I'm no longer a member of the Lin family. This way, no matter what I do, I won't embarrass the Lin family and you won't feel embarrassed because I'm your daughter. This way, won't it suit your heart and suit your purpose?" Bastard! Old Master Lin's rage could be heard from the second floor. He stood on the second floor and glared at Lin Shuya's figure. He banged his walking stick on the floor, unable to calm his anger. He roared, "How did the Lin family raise such a rebellious daughter like you? You have no sense of shame. You actually betrayed your family for a man. Good. Very good. Since you don't acknowledge the Lin family, then get lost now. Get out of this house and don't come back. Get as far away as you can." Lin Shuya did not say a word. She turned around and walked towards the door. When Lin Buxiong saw this, he became anxious. He didn't expect his daughter to be so stubborn. She would leave just like that. He hurriedly chased after her. Behind him, old Master Lin scolded angrily, "What are you chasing after? Tell her to scram. Get out of here. It's fine if the Lin clan doesn't acknowledge such an unfilial descendant. So be it." Lin Shuya also lost her temper and left the Lin family without looking back. She wandered the streets all night alone. Because of the new year, the bustling city had become an empty city. She walked to the quiet path